Chapter 368. After the heavy snowfall of the months of demons, the Redwater River became the only passable road in the entire western region. Compared with the small sailboat they had boarded before, the Lionheart was much more spacious and could accommodate a simple kitchen. Even while sailing, they could still eat hot food. His bedroom was naturally the Duke's separate room, located at the stern of the ship, similar to the poop of a ship. Through the window, he could see the constantly flowing river and the floating ice floes from time to time. "My lord, the egg soup you ordered," the knight said as he brought the earthen pot and porcelain bowl to his room. "Thank you for your hard work," Perrault nodded. "You should also sit down and have a bowl to warm up." Since His Royal Highness had taken all the night of the other 4 families to Border Town and informed them that they would not be redeemed, the first thing the nobles did was to send the families of the knight to Border Town as well. The vacated land was either used to recruit a new knight or to simply take it for themselves. Only the Honeysuckle family did not suffer too many losses in this war. Instead, by acting as the representative of Longsong's stronghold, they rapidly grew stronger and now steadily surpassed the 4 families. They also had a relatively complete knight team. Seth, the knight, was a member of the team. Although he was not as well known as the Light of Dawn, he could still be regarded as one of the more outstanding young knight. "Yes," he smiled, opened the lid of the earthen pot, and poured the soup for Perrault. "But, my lord, is it really okay for you to do this?" "You mean the witches?" "Well, although the church was burned, it's not difficult to build another one. The church will return to the western region one day. As long as you put all the blame on Prince Roland, they won't be able to say anything. But you saved a witch in front of the public, and even arrested a believer of the church." The knight hesitated. "This is tantamount to openly opposing the church. Since it's not difficult to build another one, why is that place still in ruins?" Perrault blew on the fragrant egg soup. "The church will not return to the western region." Seth blinked, as if he didn't quite believe this conclusion. When the heat of the egg soup subsided, he took a small sip and exhaled a puff of white air in satisfaction. As a manager, the most important thing is to understand the true intentions of the person in charge. His Highness had implemented education in Longsong's stronghold, used the recruits trained in Border Town, and staged an obvious drama. It was obvious that he wanted to weaken the influence of the church to a minimum. "Since I became the manager of the fortress because of His Highness, I naturally have to manage the fortress according to his wishes. If I can't even see this, I'm afraid he will immediately replace me with someone else." Perrault shrugged. "It's a piece of cake to stop the church from being rebuilt. The stonemasons and carpenters should have been warned. Even if some believers want to build their own, the rats will stop them from working. But the church, since His Royal Highness has done so, it means that he is not afraid of the church's revenge at all, or he has the confidence to keep the church out. If they are able to step into the western region again, it can only mean that His Royal Highness has failed. If he fails, I won't be able to sit on the main seat of the fortress anymore. You should understand this. Do you think that Prince Roland can defeat the army of the church?" Seth asked in surprise. "Who knows?" Perrault smiled and shook his head. "A year ago, I'm afraid no one thought that he could resist the Duke of Ryan's knight regiment." He stood up and picked up the jar. "I'll go check on that little girl. She might be hungry." The girl's name was Paper. There was no doubt that only a street child would use such a casual name. Since she had boarded the ship, she had stayed in the cabin below the deck without saying a word. Even when her fingers were red from the cold and her body was shivering, she did not make a sound. To be on the safe side, Perrault had put the god's locket of retribution on her. After all, no matter how much His Highness claimed that witches were no different from ordinary people, he did not completely believe that a person with such incredible power could really be the same as an ordinary person. Even a careless move could cause harm to herself. "Why don't you lie down under the quilt?" Perrault pointed at the hammock hanging in the cabin. The space in the cabin was limited, so the sailors usually slept in a suspended hammock with a thick linen quilt. It was not very comfortable, but at least it could keep them warm. "It'll get dirty," she said in a low voice. A sailor can't be any cleaner than you. He found a relatively dry place to sit down. This journey will take 3 days. Do you plan to sit like this all the time? I'm afraid you'll die on the road before we reach Border Town. Border Town? Paper was stunned. Didn't I tell you? We're going to a place suitable for witches to live. Perrault opened the jar. Drink some hot soup and then lie down in the hammock. This time the girl did not refuse. It was obvious that she was starving. She picked up the jar and drank directly, not afraid of burning her tongue. Perrault shook his head. Her body was as thin as a monkey's, and the dirt on her hair had already solidified. Her clothes, which had several holes in them, were probably picked up from somewhere. From her appearance, she looked no different from the many street children in Stronghold. Who's the boy who's protecting you? He asked. Your street child friend? Snake Tooth. He often brings us food. Paper swallowed the soup, stuck out her tongue, and said vaguely, as long as I go with you, you won't catch him, right? He's not a witch. Of course, Perrault said expressionlessly. He doesn't matter at all. He was a little surprised to hear that Paper often brought him food. It was rare to see such people in the slums. The lack of food led to robberies from time to time. When one could not even survive, who would have the mood to care about others? Also, the name Snake Tooth sounded a bit like Rat's style. Thinking of this, he could not help but ask, you just said that besides you, are there other witches? No. Paper shook her head. We're all orphans in the neighborhood. This made Perrault feel a little relieved. What's that old faker talking about using her ability to clear the snow? It's the first time I've seen a witch dare to use her ability in front of others. Snaketooth suggested it. He said I could help the residents clear the snow on their roofs quickly, and at the same time, exchange for some food so that everyone wouldn't starve. People are no longer afraid of witches now because the drama theater is full of witches' stories. As long as I'm willing to do it, he'll negotiate with the adults. So that's how it is. Perrault could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. This girl is quite interesting. She knows how to make good use of her resources, but she underestimates the influence of the church. Did you get anything to eat? Well. Paper lowered her head. I swept 3 roofs. One house kicked me out, and the other 2 gave me half a piece of bread and a pancake. But when it came to the 4th house, Petrov patted her head and said, have a good rest after you've finished drinking. I'll send someone to inform you when it's dinner time. 3 days later, the Lionheart arrived at the pier of Border Town. Chapter 369. When Perrault stepped out of the cabin, he did not smell the expected rotten wood smell. The pier on the side of the ship was obviously newly built, and the old dock had more than doubled in size. It no longer squeaked when he stepped on it, but made a reassuring thumping sound. Apparently, the joints between the planks were very strong, and the material was quite thick. When he walked down the dock, several uniformed guards immediately came up to him. The leader of the guards looked at the family emblem hanging on the mast of the Lionheart. Are you Sir Hull of the Honeysuckle family? Yes. Perrault nodded. This kind of question was very useful to him. I'm Perrault Hull. I came here at His Highness' invitation. Sir Iron Axe has already told us. Please follow me. The guard made a gesture. On foot? Roland was slightly startled. Yes, the stables have been demolished. The guard smiled embarrassedly. Don't worry, the roads in the town are very easy to walk on. Perrault quickly understood what the guard meant by easy to walk on. The dark streets were flat and spacious. The snow on them had been swept away, and not much water could be seen. The road seemed to be made up of many black stones with small gaps in the middle. After being soaked in water, it looked clean and translucent. What surprised him the most was that there was more than one such path. Every 100 steps, he could see a straight and crisscrossed fork. The degree of regularity was like a square drawn with a pen. After walking for half an hour, he did not see a single piece of muddy land. Perrault was surprised to find that this town was completely different from what he remembered. "Sir, is this really Border Town?" Seth's eyes widened as he looked around. "Didn't they say that this place is just a temporary shelter for mining?" "It used to be like this," the guard said with a smile. "But since His Highness came, everything began to change. The roads in the town were all built half a year ago. At that time, thousands of people were busy every day, and one could be built almost every month." Perrault noticed the pride in his tone, as if he was proud to be a member of the town. However, this was too inconceivable. Along both sides of the street were large trees, and he could imagine what it would be like once the summer came, when the green foliage would shade the sun overhead, and then the houses no sign of the low mud huts or the ramshackle wooden inns, and all round were angular brick houses, each 2 or 3 stories high, of almost the same design, and evidently built by the same masons. How could he transform a barren town into such a state in a year's time? With surprise and confusion, Perrault followed the guards into the castle area. The guide was changed to a knight in armor, and his attendants were all left outside the wall. It was only when he stepped into the castle that Perrault found the feeling he had a year ago. This place didn't seem to have changed much. Compared to the Duke's fortress, the prince's castle was obviously much smaller. The knight pushed open the door to the living room and made a gesture of invitation. He soon saw the prince sitting on the main seat. "His Royal Highness Roland Wimbledon." "Welcome to Border Town," Roland said with a smile, "Mr. Ambassador." It seems that His Highness hasn't changed much. Perrault felt inexplicably relieved. He raised his hand to his chest and respectfully saluted. "The Honeysuckle family pays tribute to you, Your Highness." "Sit down," the other nodded. "I called you here because of a very important matter. This matter concerns the future of the entire western region, and naturally includes Longsong Stronghold." "Please say it." "I intend to build a city here. The city's scope extends to the Misty Forest in the west and Longsong Stronghold in the east, encompassing half of the western region. At that time, Longsong Stronghold will exist as a stronghold in the east of the new city, and it will also be the first line of defense against the Church's army, unlike the current independent city." Roland stated in an orderly manner, "In this vast territory, the same law must be implemented and unified under the management of the new city hall. No nobles can intervene in the affairs of the city, and the 5 families of the western region are no exception." Perrault felt a fierce shock in his heart. A year ago, he also had the same idea, to let the Duke of Ryan move the line of defense against the demonic beasts to Border Town, and at the same time use the land between the 2 places. But he didn't expect that a year later, the prince would actually use this method, and the method was even more thorough than he had imagined. Turning Longsong Stronghold into a part of a city. Just by imagining it, he could understand how amazing the scale of this city would be. He subconsciously wanted to raise doubts, but just as the words were about to come out of his mouth, he swallowed them back. Since His Highness had told him about this matter, there was no doubt that he had already made a decision, and now no one could stop him from implementing this plan. Perrault didn't even think about rebelling against the prince. The crushing defeat of the Duke of Ryan left a strong impression on him, and he even felt that this gray-haired man couldn't be defeated. At least, he couldn't be defeated. So the only thing he could do was to seek his own interests in this huge change. "You said that the 5 families can't intervene in the affairs of the city, so how can the Honeysuckle family serve you?" The prince was silent for a long time until Perrault felt a little uneasy, then he chuckled and said, "You really surprised me, Mr. Ambassador." Whether it was the previous offer to redeem Longsong Stronghold or the current positive attitude, it's a rare wise decision from the nobles. After sighing, he stopped smiling and said seriously, "As long as the Honeysuckle family is willing to accept my management, you can continue to assist me in managing the Longsong area. Whether it's me or my father, we've always followed your will. I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the territory." Roland interrupted, "From now on, the nobles who accept my protection will only have the ownership of the territory, but not the right to govern it, whether it's the law enforcement or other policies, they will all be subject to the decree issued by the city hall. This. Perrault hesitated. The territory can be inherited from generation to generation, just like the title of nobility, and your family can also run farmland, workshops or other businesses. These industries, together with the land, belong to the honeysuckle family, and will not be invaded by others. This is also the protection I promised. Apart from the right to govern, the land you own will not change at all, and it will even flourish under the stimulation of the new policy. The prince continued, of course, you can also choose to return to your own territory and continue to be a feudal noble in the traditional sense. But when I finish the expansion of the new city and expand outwards, the territory will no longer belong to its original owner. Chapter 370. Do you think he will agree? Nightingale asked after Perrault left. I don't know. His promise alone won't help much. We still have to convince Earl Hull. Roland took a sip of hot tea. If he still intends to be a feudal noble, then I can only say that it's a pity. You can't bear to, can you? She teased. Of course not, Roland curled his lips. Among the nobles, he is not inflexible, he knows how to seize opportunities, and he is also very good at business. As long as he trains in Longsong's stronghold for a year or so, he will definitely become an excellent official. If he manages to convince Earl Hull, do you really intend to hand the king's city over to him? If I unify the kingdom of Greycastle, the king's city will naturally have to move to another place. Furthermore, the cities that are too far away from the western region should be managed by people from the western region, so my conditions are not empty talk. At the end of the conversation, Roland revealed to Perrault that he would not enfeoff any nobles in the future. Furthermore, after the integration of Greycastle, the whole kingdom would follow the model of the new city and implement the same laws and policies. All power would be vested in the central government. If he decided to stay, Longsong's stronghold was far from the end of his political career. It was not impossible for him to take charge of a big city or become the chief bureaucrat of the central administrative office. As for how far he could go, that would depend on his own ability. Roland hoped that the other party could understand the expectation contained in his words. Well, I don't understand these things anyway, Nightingale patted his shoulder. But the new witch will be here soon, so it's better for you to leave for a while. You're the only one asking. I'll call Vendi over. The voice beside him chuckled. She's better at this than I am. For the sake of safety, mainly due to Scroll's suggestion, the witch union had to first have Nightingale confirm the witch's identity before accepting a foreign witch. Due to the need to remove the god's stone of retaliation to detect lies in the state of fog, Roland could not be present, in case the other party suddenly launched an attack and caused an accident. Scroll had even come up with 10 general questions for identification, such as, where are you from, your real name, do you know the prince, do you have any hostility towards the prince, and so on. Considering that Nightingale could only judge the truth of her own beliefs and was unable to see through a lie that she was certain of, these questions were probed from all angles, leaving almost no blind spots. Even if he could fool one or two of them, he wouldn't be able to answer all of them. Roland himself didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but considering that the witches had good intentions, he could only let them be. After leaving the reception room, he returned to his office and immediately called for Berev, the city hall manager. Perrault's report on the discovery of a new witch in Longsong's stronghold made him aware of his own negligence. Although he had sent Nana to the ceremony and officially declared the existence of witches in Border Town, there had never been a government decree that directly explained the treatment and status of witches. Therefore, it was also possible that a situation like the one in Longsong's stronghold would occur in Border Town. After knowing that he had awakened as a witch, he still chose to hide his identity, rather than taking the initiative to stand out. As soon as Berev entered the door, Roland ordered, I want to issue a long-term recruitment notice, the content will be written on this draft paper. He took the draft document and quickly looked through it. You want to recruit witches with a monthly salary of 1 golden dragon? Yes, Roland nodded. This is also the standard salary of the witch union. The monthly salary of one golden dragon was definitely the highest salary in this era. The salary level of Border Town was generally higher than that of other cities. The highest starting salary for an acid factory worker had already climbed to 20 silver royals, while a witch's salary was 5 times that. This recruitment not only explained the treatment of witches, but was also equivalent to affirming their status. Since you want to get more witches, why don't you mobilize the people to find them? Barav asked, just like before when you let the people report spies, they are the sharpest eyes. Now even the chief steward has learned the people's war in the vast sea trick. The prince held back his laughter and waved his hand. Then I will give them a bonus. Isn't that the same as the church's practice? But, you are doing this to recruit witches, not to hang them. Even if that's the case, the witches who are exposed by the public may think that I'm forcing them. You should know that this year's new witches haven't experienced persecution, so their situation can't be compared to that of the witches outside, Roland said non-committally. I hope that they will voluntarily come forward and contribute their strength to Border Town. In addition to the individual wishes of the witches, he was more worried that if the government decreed that there would be a reward for the discovery of a witch, as well as a reward for the birth of a witch, it was likely to lead to a new round of reporting, or to turn the birth of a witch into a business. Giving birth to a witch was not as good as hard work. In a short period of time, it could greatly change the status of the witches, but in the long run, this policy would have a negative impact on the slogan of, "Get rich through hard work," in Border Town. Therefore, a simple recruitment of witches could effectively avoid this situation. Barav had just bowed and retreated when Vendi came in and handed the results of the inquiry to the table. Your Highness, the identity has been confirmed. It is basically the same as what the eldest son of the honeysuckle family said, there is no problem. See, Roland said with a smile. You are too careful. But this caution is necessary, Vendi insisted. Your personal safety is the first thing we need to ensure. Well, Roland suddenly felt touched and took a deep breath. Then bring her in. The girl was about 15 or 16 years old, with dirty dark brown hair and eyes that revealed timidity and panic. It was probably the first time she had walked into a carpeted room, and she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. According to the results recorded on the paper, she called herself Paper and was born on the outskirts of Longsong Stronghold. 3 years ago, after a heavy snow, she became an orphan. This kind of experience was probably similar to that of most of the homeless children in the western region. They would either die fighting for food, or join the underground rats and become thieves, thugs, or scapegoats. Roland didn't know what to say for a moment. She didn't have a strong ability to adapt like Agatha, nor was she as strong-willed as Anna. Even Mystery Moon and Lily, who were similar to her, had sisters from the Witch Cooperation Association as companions. As a little girl in a strange place, she was probably still in a state of panic, and it would probably take a long time for her to adapt to her new life. Moreover, from Perrault's report, it could be seen that the ability to melt snow quickly was related to the temperature. In any case, he wasn't in a hurry to test her ability, and he could slowly understand her through getting along with her. Thinking of this, he looked at Vendi. The long voyage must have exhausted her. Take her to take a bath and let her rest for a while. Arrange her room in the witch building, and as for the matters related to magic power, I will leave it to you to teach her, is that okay? Of course, she smiled. As you wish. Chapter 371. The bathtub in the bathroom was steaming. Vendi smeared the wet soap all over the little girl's body, including behind her ears, under her armpits, and between her fingers. Seeing the stains slide off along with the bubbles, revealing the delicate skin underneath, she felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. She hadn't experienced this feeling for a long time. When the Witch Cooperation Association was on the run, every new witch who was in a panic or had fallen into despair was under her care. She was the one who restored their calm and rekindled their hope for a better life. Leaf was like this, Lily was like this, and Nightingale was also like this. But since coming to Border Town, the witches' lives had undergone earth-shaking changes, and everyone no longer had to worry about survival. She wasn't saying that this wasn't good, and she was very grateful for what Roland had done for her sisters. However, without the witches who needed to be taken care of, even Mystery Moon had become more cheerful, which made Vendi feel a little lost. Now, she finally felt the joy of being a big sister again. "Close your eyes, I'm going to shower." Yes, the other party's voice was light and soft, just like the water droplets sliding down the grass. She had to say, His Highness' decision was really great. The water streaked through the girl's hair, flowed down her back, and carried away the grayish-brown foam. It wasn't until she rinsed 3 times that the color of the water returned to normal. Without the cover of clothes, her thin and weak body was completely reflected in Vendi's eyes. What a thin and weak child, Vendi couldn't help but think. Her spine was protruding from her back, her arms were so thin that one could hold them with one hand, and her skin wasn't white, but had a pale yellow color caused by long-term starvation, which was completely inconsistent with the name Paper. Fortunately, she was a witch, and as long as she took good care of herself, it wouldn't take long for her to return to normal. After her body was washed clean, the next step was to enjoy the bath. Vendi tested the temperature of the water and carried her into the bathtub. The slightly scalding hot water immediately engulfed the two of them, but as long as they endured the initial discomfort, they would soon feel the happiness of being surrounded by warmth. Paper couldn't help but let out a low moan. It had probably been a long time since she'd had a hot bath. Her arms, which were tightly hugging Vendi, gradually relaxed. Vendi spun the girl around in a half circle, letting her sit in her arms. She then carefully parted her hair, which had been bunched up into a ball. "When did you discover that you were a witch?" 2 years ago, Paper said in a low voice. "I think it was also winter." "That's not surprising," Vendi said with a smile. "Most witches will awaken during the months of the demons, because rumor has it that magic is the most abundant during this time. Isn't it the power of demons?" Of course, she patted the other's head. Becoming a witch is a very, very normal thing. In addition to being able to display incredible abilities, we are not much different from ordinary people. You should know that hundreds of years ago, witches were regarded as the favored children of the gods. Really? It's absolutely true. In fact, there was still quite a big difference between the two, such as the overall improvement in appearance and body, as well as the inability to bear children, Vendi thought. However, she could slowly teach her about these things in the future. "Then, what is magic power?" Paper asked timidly. "It's a naturally occurring power, like the radiance of the sun, which is everywhere." Vendi thought for a moment. That's not right. The sun still sets, but magic power doesn't. In short, you just have to treat it as a part of your body, a part that will continuously grow. Continuously grow. That's right, it will become stronger as you grow older. In order to accommodate it, you must also increase your body's endurance, otherwise you will suffer a backlash. She explained carefully. The church used this to their advantage, falsely claiming that witches were devoured by the power of demons. In fact, they were completely wrong. As long as you continue to practice your ability, you can increase the capacity of your magic power without worrying about it affecting your body. If you had awakened as a witch 2 years ago, you would have already passed your first day of awakening. It must have been very painful, at that time. The girl nodded twice. "Don't worry, now that you're in Border Town, everything will be fine," Vendi comforted her softly. "If you practice hard, you should be able to pass this year's day of awakening easily." As they were talking, the bathroom door was suddenly pushed open, and Lily ran in with a towel. "I heard there's a new sister." Where? Mystery Moon said she wanted to see her." "It's obviously you who wants to see her." Mystery Moon, who had been dragged in behind them, rolled her eyes. "If you take a bath now, what if you still have to practice your ability in the afternoon?" "Don't worry, it's okay to rest for a day. His Highness won't trouble you with anything. You're not Miss Anna. You traitor." Seeing the two intruding, Paper immediately shrunk her head, half submerging herself in the water. "Oh, this is the new witch? Lily lay on the edge of the bath, looking at her with great interest. She seems to be about the same age as me, but you can still call me sister. Why should I call you sister when I'm about the same age as you? Mystery Moon shouted. I've never seen you call me that. They're both witches from Border Town. Vendi smiled and introduced them. Don't be fooled by their current appearance. When they first arrived here, they were basically the same as you. Especially Mystery Moon, she's not much bolder than you, and she always speaks in a soft voice. Ahem, I'm just worried that His Highness will dislike my ability, Mystery Moon muttered. His Highness has told me many times that your ability has great potential. Vendi shook her head. As long as you finish learning elementary physics, you may evolve into an unimaginable ability. Don't mention those books, she can't even read all the words, and she barely passed the last test. Lily shrugged. She even asked me to tutor her at night. By the time she learns those strange theorems and formulas in the books, His Highness Roland may have already unified Greycastle and won't need the help of witches anymore. Ignoring Mystery Moon, who was frowning, Lily looked at the girl in Vendi's arms. By the way, what's Paper's ability? Melting snow, Paper said after a moment of hesitation. What else? Lily asked curiously. Can you turn melted water back into ice? No, Paper said in a low voice. And she can quickly turn hot water into cold water. Is that temperature control? Vendi pondered. But melting snow is warming up, and cooling hot water is cooling down. The two can't be achieved in reverse, and it doesn't feel like it. Have you only tried to use your ability on water? Other things, there aren't many changes. Try this, Lily said, holding up a basin of soapy water that had been washed. The girl carefully put her hand into the basin, and soon, the steaming water cooled down. Then, under everyone's gaze, the muddy soapy water underwent a strange change. The floating bubbles gradually disappeared, and the surging white particles also disappeared. The basin of water became clear and transparent again. Chapter 372. 3 days later, Roland received a positive reply from the eldest son of the Honeysuckle family. I'm willing to continue to serve you, and so will the Honeysuckle family. He bowed and said, I'll convince my father that he's different from the other families. Is that so? Roland suddenly felt happy. That's for the best. These days, I've witnessed the astonishing changes in your territory. Perhaps, this is the city I've been hoping for, Perrault said bluntly. If Honeysuckle can become as prosperous as this, my father won't mind merging the family with the new city. This sentence touched the prince a little. He had originally called him over for 2 reasons. One was that it would be more sincere to explain such an important matter face to face, and the other was to observe his attitude towards the transfer order. He did not expect it to have such an effect. He nodded. Of course, as long as there's time, every piece of land in Greycastle can become a comfortable place for the people. Then I'll return to Stronghold as soon as possible and tell my father this news. And the other 4 families and all the nobles in the western region, Roland added. As long as the families are willing to accept this condition, the new city will accept them regardless of the past. You can hold a banquet in Stronghold Castle and spread my words. You mean, you want me to inform them? Perrault was startled. That's right, the prince said with a smile. This time, you'll be my ambassador. Yes, your highness. The eldest son of the Honeysuckle family bowed with his hand on his chest. Just as he was about to leave, Roland stopped him. By the way, you've done a good job with the witches. Now there's no need to be secretive anymore. Now that universal education has been achieved, those who still have expectations for the church and refuse to come to their senses can all be removed from the western region. As for what to do, you decide. Yes. After Perrault Hull excused himself, Roland stretched himself and continued to look through the statistics of the various projects in City Hall. Due to the heavy snow, the construction of the Kingdom Avenue had been halted, and the construction of the residential buildings had also slowed down. Basically, only some interior decoration work was carried out. Fortunately, Lotus had built a large number of caves before she left, which basically met the needs of the subsequent refugees. Even if the number of refugees continued to increase, they only needed to put more people into each cave. This was the advantage of using the heated Kong. According to the Ministry of Construction, at least 60% of the workers were currently idle, which made some temporary recruitment posts posted by City Hall popular, such as clearing the snow on the streets, transporting ore in the furnace district, and so on. In other cities, it was already incredible that there were so many people working enthusiastically during the months of demons. Winter was the hardest for civilians. Most people stayed at home and relied on the food saved in the fall. However, in Roland's eyes, he was unwilling to see so many idle laborers. He thought that perhaps he should do something to make use of all of them. After all, Margaret's Chamber of Commerce had towed away the last batch of steam engines for the year. The City Hall had plenty of money and food, so he had plenty of plans to implement. Thinking of this, Roland asked his guards to summon the Minister of Construction, Carr van Bate. After explaining his idea, Carr could not help but widen his eyes. "You want stonemasons and masons to build a ship for you?" He nodded and said seriously, "That's right. The location will be near the dock. We'll build a temporary factory out of wood and light a brazier indoors to ensure the temperature. After it's built, we can push it directly into the water." "But Your Highness, how could they know how to make such a thing?" "Of course, just like the construction of the witch building." Roland took out a piece of paper and drew a diagram. "Set up the formwork, lay the steel bars, pour the concrete. I'll guide you on how to build the first ship, and you'll be responsible for supervising the rest of the ships. This way, we can make use of all the workers." Carr looked at the sketch in confusion. "This is a basin?" He couldn't help but smile. "That's right, a huge cement basin." Since Carr did not participate in the construction of Littletown, it was not surprising that he had such an idea. In fact, during the long development of the ship, it had undergone several changes in form, and there were not many inheritances between the beginning and the end. Asking Roland to design a classical wooden ship with a keel, he naturally did not know anything about it. However, building a cement ship was essentially no different from molding a clay model, as long as it could float. The same was true for steel ships. Due to the advancement of welding technology, the majority of modern ships had abandoned the practice of laying keels. Instead, they were pieced together from steel boxes. The whole bottom was loaded, so there was no need to master the manufacturing method of the wooden ship in advance. Regarding the new batch of cement ships, he had already considered it for a long time. Whether it was to mine the coal resources near the snowy mountains or to transport refugees, he needed a batch of inland river ships with a higher load to carry out the task. Therefore, a low-draft flat-bottom design was still the most suitable choice. Compared to the conservative design of Littletown, the new ship could be longer, ensuring the load and stability while increasing its speed. At the same time, in order to reduce the construction difficulty, Roland finally decided to use a paddle wheel propulsion system. This had already been tested on the wooden ship, so it would be easier for the craftsmen to get used to it. "Your Highness, how many people do you plan to invest in building these cement ships?" Carr asked, somewhat awkwardly. "Gather all the idle workers. Just like building a residential building, we can start building several ships at once. In this way, even if the newly assembled steam engine couldn't be sold, it would still have a place to be used. The furnace area could also continue to burn cement without stopping, which could be said to be killing many birds with one stone. In the coming year, if he could have a large-scale cement fleet, no matter where the First Army attacked, it would be equivalent to having a reliable logistical support." After explaining this matter, Roland planned to go to the castle's back garden to have a look. The olive trees and grapevines planted by Leaf provided shelter from the wind and snow. If there was no work on hand, the witches would generally practice their abilities in the garden, and the newcomer paper should be no exception. According to Vendi's report, her ability was neither temperature control nor material reduction. Apart from water, it had very little effect on other objects, which made Roland quite curious. Now that 3 days had passed, the little girl should not be as timid as she was when she first arrived, so it would be better to go and see for himself. As soon as he entered the garden, Roland noticed something strange. Within his line of sight, there was lush greenery, as if it was completely isolated from the snow-white world outside. The olive trees were evergreen, and there were vines intertwining between the branches, so it was not strange that the snowflakes could not drift in, but these plants were too full of vitality. Moreover, unlike the silent forest, there was no cold wind blowing, but the grass and trees were gently swaying, orderly and rhythmically. He originally thought it was an illusion, but as he went deeper, he saw the branches of the olive trees droop, as if they were bowing to him, and the grass at his feet fell to one side, as if to welcome his arrival. This feeling made Roland's hair stand on end, and goosebumps appeared on his back. He felt that he was not walking in a garden, but passing through the body of a giant creature. The whole garden seemed to be breathing. Chapter 373. Roland walked to the center of the garden and was stunned. At the end of the passageway was a small room made of plants. Tree trunks and improved crops formed the walls. Crisscrossing vines hung from the top of the head, as if they had been meticulously woven. Among the green leaves, there were a few clusters of sparkling grapes. There was a bonfire burning in the middle of the room, surrounded by green furniture. If one looked closely, they would find that they were all made of strange plants that grew out of the ground. For a moment, he thought he had come to a fairy tale world. If it were not for the several familiar figures standing by the bonfire, he would really think it was a dream. What's going on? Tilly turned around and showed a look of surprise. Leaf's ability has evolved. She has turned into this garden. Where is she? Roland was surprised. She has integrated with the plants. Tilly looked around. Everything you see in front of you is a part of Leaf. It seemed that it was not an illusion that he was walking in the body of a giant creature. It was just that the giant creature was replaced by Leaf. Roland's heart suddenly tightened. She won't be unable to recover, will she? As long as the ability is removed, I can return to my normal state. Leaf's voice suddenly sounded. However, if one listened carefully, they would realize that it wasn't her speaking. Instead, it was the sound of rustling leaves and the rustling of branches. Her answer made Roland feel a little relieved. You can hear us? Not only can I hear, but I can also see, smell, and touch. Leaf seemed very happy. I can feel any changes in the garden, including the birds building their nests on the branches, the insects crawling on the tree trunks. It's hard to describe this feeling. Lady Tilly is right. I am now the garden itself. From the moment you walked in here, I noticed you. As she spoke, a huge leaf rolled up from the ceiling and hung down to Roland's hand. It slowly bloomed, revealing a cup filled with purple-red liquid. The cup was made of 4 overlapping olive leaves. The stem of the leaves formed the handle of the cup, making it look small and exquisite. Roland picked up the glass and took a sip. He found that it was a freshly brewed wine. It was slightly sour with a refreshing sweetness. It seemed that both the wine and the containers came from this garden. Roland drank the toast from the other party, walked to the campfire, and sat on the plant bench with great interest. The support of the bench was made of coarse bark branches, and the surface and back of the bench were covered with a thick layer of wheat leaves. Sitting on the bench was like sitting on a sofa. There was a barbecue grill next to the bonfire, and Andrea was roasting apples and corn for everyone. There was no doubt that these had all been taken from the garden. How did you do all this? Asked the prince, looking up. I'm not sure about the process, the voice replied quickly. I was just taking care of the newly planted crops and your flying messengers as usual, while practicing my abilities, and then they answered my call. This might be the path of fusion that I've been searching for all this time, turning the forest and the life it nurtures into a true whole. What if I use my ability in the concealing forest? Can it also become a part of you? I don't think. She hesitated for a moment. Even if I can, it will take a long time. It doesn't take much magic to maintain this state, and the forest can even replenish it for me. But every time I expand the range of control, I feel that my thinking is sluggish. Sluggish? Roland was stunned. I don't know how to describe this feeling, said Leaf. If I slowly expand the range of control, after a few years, I should be able to become one with the concealing forest. But if I merge with it instantly, I'm afraid I'll lose my mind. When I first merged with the garden, I felt that my brain wasn't enough, as if my mind suddenly became very empty. It took a long time to adapt to it. She paused and added, but the plants that I've already controlled won't feel so unfamiliar when I enter again. I can do it with just a thought. It's really incredible, thought Roland. Compared with Anna and Lily's evolution in the microscopic direction, Leaf's new ability was obviously a breakthrough in the macroscopic direction. If one day she could control the entire concealing forest, no enemy's movements would escape her eyes and ears. Congratulations, said Vendi with a smile. Now the Witch Union has one more evolved witch. According to Agatha, this is equivalent to half the size of the Union. If she were here, she would definitely sigh for a long time. Roland smiled, then looked at the little girl who was peeking at him curiously. Where's Paper? As for her ability, I'm afraid we need to conduct further tests, replied Vendi. But I found a strange phenomenon. With a snap of her fingers, 2 bundles of packed snow quickly fell from the roof. Vendi spread them out one by one, placing one by the bonfire and the other in the corner of the room. She then let Paper use her ability on them. I'm currently teaching her how to use her magic power evenly to achieve a stable effect, just like what you taught me in the beginning. Although she still can't control it precisely, there shouldn't be too much of a difference in general. Roland noticed that the pile of snow near the bonfire quickly melted into a puddle of icy water, while the pile further away had only melted halfway. Vendi carried the puddle of melted water to the wall and knocked on it. The tightly wrapped vines retracted to both sides, revealing a fist-sized hole. The cold wind from outside immediately poured in. Here, use your ability on this again, she said to Paper. The little girl nodded and stretched out her hands. To Roland's surprise, the puddle of snow in the leaves had once again formed a thin layer of ice crystals. Is this, speeding up time and bringing forward the results? As soon as the words left his mouth, he rejected his own conjecture. No, time was just a concept humans created for their own convenience, it didn't exist in itself. How could something that didn't exist affect it? I thought so at first, but Lady Tilly said that wasn't the case. Vendi used a vine to hang a rock and shook it in front of Paper. The latter used her ability again, but the pendulum didn't change in speed. It continued to swing left and right at the same rate until it finally stopped. If it's speeding up time, it should swing even faster, right? Indeed, Roland quickly realized the nature of his opponent's ability. She wasn't affecting time, but the movement of particles. Magic power changed the energy level of particles, causing them to decrease or increase. On a macroscopic level, it appeared as freezing or melting. Of course, Paper herself probably didn't understand this at all. She was only using her ability based on what she felt, which was why she came to the conclusion that it didn't have much effect on other objects. Oxidation was a relatively long process, and it would take a longer time to see the results. If his guess was correct, then her ability was a natural catalyst. Chapter 374. A week later, Border Town ushered in the last month of autumn in a heavy snowfall. Roland looked out of the office window and saw black figures moving on the snow-white roofs. This was the daily work of the townspeople. They shoveled the snow from the roofs to the ground, so as not to collapse the roofs. So far, it had been exactly 1 year since he came to this world. But the autumn of the previous year was far less cold, and from here he could not see so many neat and dense houses. At that time, it was not strange to say that the town was about to be abandoned. In addition to a circle of decent-looking wooden houses around the square, there were only broken mud houses and thatched houses. Most of the nobles' residences were concentrated around the square, and the only stone road was from there to the castle. Apart from that, there was no flat ground in the whole town, and human and animal excrement was everywhere. Now, all the roads here had been replaced with water-stable pavement. Even without covering it, it was still an excellent quality hard road. The dark lines divided the silver-white town into many squares of different sizes. On both sides of the spacious main road was the planned commercial area, and on the periphery was the residential area. In addition, Border Town's industry was gradually taking shape, or in other words, it had finally changed from workshop production to self-recycling production lines. Of course, it was only limited to the steam engine. The high furnace area could produce iron ingots that met the processing requirements, and the steam plant could process them into parts. The blacksmiths were no longer unfamiliar with all kinds of machine tools, and at the same time they had a large number of apprentices. Although the extremely accurate steam machine tools had to be made by Anna, it was still a very rare progress for them. After all, before this group of people had only touched a blacksmith's hammer, or were simply miners or hunters. For the time being, it could be seen that the workers relied on their own strength to produce. In addition, the production of bullets and gunpowder were all handled by ordinary people. At present, Anna still needed to personally produce firearms. The reason was not because of the lack of processing machines, but because the town's blast furnace could not produce stable quality steel. This had been listed as an urgent problem by Roland in the next stage. The achievements in the chemical industry were much more surprising. Probably because he did not have much hope, any results were a pleasant surprise. Now that sulfuric acid and nitric acid had begun to be mass-produced, and chemical explosives had begun to take shape, as long as the production of bullets could be increased, it wouldn't be difficult to switch to a new generation of repeating guns. It didn't matter if the town's production method was outdated, but for the town's current situation, solving the problem was more important. When Paper's abilities stabilized and she could control her own magic accurately, the chemical industry might reach new heights. The most important thing was that, whether it was in terms of production, education, or construction, Border Town was now moving towards a benign stage of development. As long as there was enough time, the number of educated people would increase, and breakthroughs in various fields would become faster and faster. Using a year's time to turn a barren land into what it was today, he felt a sense of accomplishment from the bottom of his heart. Standing by the window and observing the town, Roland felt that he could look at it for an entire day. At this moment, a melodious bell tolled from the northwest. It was a warning that the demonic beasts would attack. After the arrival of the months of the demons, the alarm would ring every 3 or 4 days. However, the First Army was already used to dealing with this situation, and there was no need for Roland to personally go to the city wall to supervise the battle. Thinking back to a year ago, if he hadn't appeared in the field of vision of the militia, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't throw down their weapons and flee. The demonic beasts are here again. Should I go take a look? Nightingale's voice sounded in his ears. Yes. Roland nodded. Be careful. Don't worry, they can't touch me. Then he felt a slight warmth on his cheeks, and the voice disappeared. Roland shook his head helplessly. It was probably because of the heavy snow that the witches were bored to death. Although they said they were observing the situation, they were actually looking for something to do. In particular, the combat witches brought by Tilly would always go to the city wall to watch the battle, waiting for the hybrid demonic beasts that could rush up to the top of the wall so that they could show off their skills. Since knowing about this, Nightingale also became interested. Whenever the alarm rang, she would go with them. Perhaps she wanted to compete with the other party to see who was the strongest combat witch. Roland sighed in his heart. He had never seen her so diligent in her studies. However, since fighting side by side could improve the understanding between witches and ordinary people, he was too lazy to stop them. The current revolving rifles could deal with ordinary demonic beasts, but they were still somewhat inadequate against the hybrid demonic beasts. With the powerful witches on the scene, they could effectively stabilize the line of defense and reduce the possibility of casualties. So far, the First Army had not had a single death. Nightingale's departure made his heart move. The combat witches had their own activities to relieve boredom, but the assistant witches didn't have so much fun. Probably, it was time to create some new entertainment activities. Thinking of this, he called Soroya. "Your Highness, is there a new task for me to complete?" This painter, who had made great contributions to Border Town, seemed to be in good spirits. The freckles on her face had faded a lot, and there was an unconcealable youthful vitality in her smile. Her initiative to ask made Roland slightly suffocated. Why did he suddenly feel a sense of guilt? Have you been busy with work recently?" "No, why do you ask?" Soroya brushed the hair in front of her forehead. "Recently, the number of people going to the factory to work has decreased a lot. I can finish the coating in only half a day, and the alchemist Mr. Kyle was busy making those strange metal boxes." She paused, tilted her head and smiled. "But compared to the days when I stayed in the camp of the Witch Cooperation Association, I prefer this fulfilling life now, and I am very happy that I can help you with my ability." "Oh, this smile is so dazzling." Roland couldn't help but feel a little guilty. "Ahem, I called you here to draw some new cards." "More Gwent cards?" "No, you're probably tired of those," he waved his hand. "After all, the rules are very simple. If you know the cards in your opponent's hand, there won't be many changes." "Well, that's true, you see, the new cards are like this, very simple." Roland took out a piece of white paper and drew a rough sketch. "They are divided into 4 suits, and then count from 1 to 13. Finally, add a king and a queen, a total of 54 cards." Soroya's ability had made great progress. She directly used the sketch as a base and quickly drew a hard-coded card. "How do I play this?" "There are many ways to play it, but let's start with the simple one." Roland tried the feel of the poker cards, and immediately found the feeling he had before he traveled to another world. During the Spring Festival, the most common thing for the family was to sit in the fire barrel, watch the Spring Festival Gala, play poker all night, and light firecrackers in the morning to welcome the arrival of the Spring Festival. Compared to another traditional entertainment, mahjong, poker didn't have any requirements for the venue. It could be started by putting a board on the leg, and there were many ways to play. It was probably the most popular game in the world. "Go and call Anna," Roland said with a smile. "I'll teach you fight the landlord." To be continued. Chapter 375. Philin stood behind his wife, watching her carefully selecting the goods in the stall with a smile. Every time she did this, Irene's eyes were always particularly serious. "Actually, each piece of meat is calculated by weight, so it doesn't matter which one you choose." "No." She firmly refused. "You like to eat lean meat, right? But without the fat part, it won't be fragrant enough when cooked. A layer of fat and a layer of lean is the best rib, and it's also very suitable for slicing and frying. You have to choose carefully." Ferlin couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Well, you can take your time here. I'm going to buy a bag of wheat first. We still have to queue up for a while. Come and find me when you're done." "Okay," Irene replied without looking back. He shook his head helplessly, turned around and went to the grain stall in the convenience market. Since it started snowing, the Lord had erected wooden sheds around the market to block the wind, and specially posted a notice to announce that even in winter, the sales here would not stop. This meant that in the long months of demons, the town would still provide a stable supply of food. For the townspeople, this was undoubtedly a powerful reassurance measure. Compared with the less visited meat stalls, the grain stall was much more crowded. There was a long queue in front of the counter, surrounded by 2 patrolmen in black uniforms to maintain order. But in the town, they had a completely different name: the police. The light of dawn had become accustomed to the various amazing innovations of the Lord, so it was not unusual for him to change the name. And he also knew that most of the civilians had the impression that the patrolmen were no different from hooligans, so changing the name would indeed make people feel different. Mr. Schilt, good afternoon. Someone in the queue recognized him. You also came to buy wheat. Stand by me. I'll give my place to you. No, no need. Philin waved his hand and stood at the back of the queue. Thank you. You're really popular, the middle-aged man in front of him said with a smile. You deserve to be the former first knight of the Western region. Philin was taken aback. You know that I used to, haha, of course, this isn't a secret in Border Town. Roland touched his chin and grinned. My son and daughter are very fond of you. Ever since they heard about your origins, my eldest son, Nat, has been clamoring to become a knight. That's all in the past, he shook his head, and His Highness no longer needs the knight. We have the first army, the middle-aged man said nonchalantly. I wouldn't have dared to talk to you like this in the past. Indeed, when he was still a Duke Knight, most civilians didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Behind his back, there were words of envy and respect, but more than that, there was fear. Irene was the only one who dared to look him in the eye and speak bluntly without any regard for her identity. It was that first meeting at the theater that allowed his heart to find a home. After being defeated and captured, Ferlin had come to Border Town. He had thought that he would just be working for a different lord, but he had never expected that he would end up becoming a teacher who taught everyone knowledge. Moreover, he had also gained the respect of everyone. This kind of respect was completely different from what he felt when he was a knight. Instead of avoiding or staying away from him, people hoped to get closer to him. Compared with the respect of keeping a distance, the latter made Philin feel more warm and satisfied. Perhaps, he wasn't suitable to be a knight. After waiting for more than a quarter of an hour, it was Philin Schilt's turn. ID card, the clerk said, and then she was startled. Teacher Philin. Betty. He was also a little surprised. The girl standing behind the counter was one of his first graduates. Then Philin quickly understood and said happily, You've entered the city hall? Yes, she said with a happy expression on her face. She nodded and saluted him just like she did in the academy. I'm now an apprentice of the city hall, and I'm currently working in the Ministry of Agriculture. Philin didn't want to keep the people behind him waiting, so he handed over his ID card and 6 silver royals. I want to buy a medium bag of wheat. Okay. She registered his name in the book, turned around and shouted. A porter came out of the warehouse and put a bag of wheat on the counter. No inspection or selection was allowed here. Each bag was already packed and divided into 3 types according to weight, large, medium, and small. The small bag was almost enough for 2 people to eat for a month. The price of food was fixed, and there was almost no fluctuation. You had to show your ID card when buying, and the amount you could buy was also limited. Philin understood that this measure was obviously to prevent people from buying a lot of food, which would cause the civilians who really needed food to be unable to buy. Teacher, come to my house when you have time. Betty handed back his ID card. Yes, Philin responded with a smile. He carried the bag of wheat and walked to the side to make room. Until then, Irene was still nowhere to be seen. She probably had her eyes on other goods. He found an eye-catching and dry place, put the bag on the ground, and sat down to rest for a while. Just then, a blue figure flashed in front of him. The light of dawn was startled, and couldn't help but turn his head to look, and then his whole body trembled. It was a beautiful woman with a delicate face and rare blue hair. She belonged to the type that would never be forgotten at first glance. Philin felt the blood in his body almost freeze. It was not because of the woman's outstanding appearance, but he had seen her in the family hall. When he was a child, he had asked more than once who the portrait hanging on the wall of the hall was, but his father had kept silent. She was undoubtedly a woman, but she was placed in front of all the portraits of his grandfather. He had only heard his father mention her once when he was drunk. If he remembered correctly, the woman in the portrait was the founder of the Schilt family. How could this be? Sorry to keep you waiting. Irene's voice pulled him back from his chaotic thoughts. I picked some eggs and bought a small bag of butter. Did you buy the wheat? Yes. Philin answered absent-mindedly. When he returned home, the scene in the painting was still in front of him, and he couldn't get the woman's figure out of his mind. Why did I meet the ancestor of the Schilt family in Border Town? After hesitating for a long time, he decided to go back to Longsong's stronghold. When Philin told his plan to Irene, the latter raised her eyebrows. Haven't you already severed ties with the family? Why do you want to go back? Because, he said hesitantly, because of some things. Inheritance? Irene tilted her head. No, is it because of a woman? Ahem, Philin tilted his head. How could it be? But your eyes tell me that you're lying. She pressed the light of dawn on a chair and looked down at him. You promised to be my knight, and I believe that you won't break your promise. That's why I'm so curious. And what can't you tell me? In front of the farmhouse on the outskirts of Longsong's stronghold, we agreed that nothing should be hidden. Her eyes were transparent and moving. She wanted to share everything with him at any time, no matter good or bad. After so many hardships, Irene still hadn't changed. Philin took a deep breath, pulled her into his arms, and softly told her his doubts. I see. After listening to his story, Irene nodded. Then you go. You believe me? It was reasonable to say that even he himself couldn't believe such a bizarre story. An ancestor was actually living in the present. Of course. She blinked. This time you didn't look away. To be continued. Chapter 376. It was reasonable to say that since he had left the family, he should not return to Schilt's territory, but Philin did not come to answer his own doubts, but for his father. After the banquet, Sir Schilt not only talked about the woman in the painting, but also seemed very emotional, saying that the family existed because of her kindness, but his grandfather's generation had failed to live up to her kindness. Philin could not understand these words at that time, but his father's expression was still fresh in his memory. It was a kind of regret for what his grandfather had done. Since it was a regret, would there be a chance to remedy it? Perhaps the woman he saw was a descendant of the founder of the family. After all, he left the family because he did not want to be separated from Irene. As the eldest son, the family could not accept him officially marrying a commoner. It was just that the two sides had different choices, it was not that the Schilt family had let him down. After marrying Irene, although Sir Schilt did not come to see him, his mother still sent some daily necessities and a letter, telling his father that he had forgiven him. It was because of these reasons that Philin made the decision to bring the news to his family. Due to the influence of the months of demons, the number of ships going back and forth between Longsong's stronghold had been greatly reduced. It took him 3 days to wait for a merchant ship from Longsong's stronghold, plus the time needed to unload and count the goods. It had already been a week since they arrived at Longsong's stronghold. Walking down the pier, Philin immediately felt the desolation of the city. The snow on the ground was already ankle-high, except for some footprints of different depths in a few alleys. The snow on the streets was flat, indicating that no one had passed through for a long time. Compared to the bustling border town, it was hard to believe that this was the largest city in the western region. The territory of the Schilt family was close to the north of Longsong's stronghold. It was a village of nearly 2,000 acres. Even the scene in Longsong's stronghold was like this, let alone the village. Walking along the carriage tracks to the mansion, along the way he could see some dead bodies of starving people. The heavy snow in early autumn would catch most of the poor unprepared, no matter if it was food or firewood, half of them might not be able to survive until next spring. This was a normal phenomenon during the months of demons, but Philin could not get used to it. After passing through a few scattered wooden houses, Philin returned to his home after many years. The iron gate of the courtyard was tightly shut, and the front yard was covered with snow. However, several stone paths had been cleared. Clearly, there were still people in the family taking care of the manor. He knocked hard on the iron door, and not long after, 2 guards walked out of the mansion. One of them quickly recognized Philin and said in surprise, You are eldest young master. I want to see Sir Schilt, Philin said calmly. Although everyone in the mansion knew that the Light of Dawn had severed ties with his family, this was, after all, a matter between nobles. The guards did not dare to act on their own. The two guards quickly opened the iron gate. One of them led him to the hall to wait, while the other reported to the butler. Philin did not expect that the first one to arrive was his younger brother, Miso Schilt. You don't belong here anymore. Why did you come back? He frowned and looked at his brother. Did you walk here? Where's your squire? I'm not a knight anymore. Philin smiled. Naturally, I don't have a squire. Ah, I almost forgot. You were beaten by the prince of Border Town and became his prisoner. Did he let you come back? Miso snorted. Is it because you don't have money for the winter? I can give you some, and then you can leave. Philin sighed at Miso's attitude. It was not difficult to understand his reaction. Miso Schilt had now become the first heir of the family. Naturally, he did not want Philin to come back to avoid unnecessary trouble. I'm not here for money. I have no intention of competing with you for the position of heir, the Light of Dawn said in a low voice. His Highness hired me as a tutor. I'm very satisfied with my current life. Tutor? Miso was stunned. Why don't I remember that you have such high knowledge to teach other nobles? Not to teach nobles, but to teach commoners to read and write. To teach commoners. He sneered. The lies you make up are getting more and more interesting. Don't tell me that commoner's wife has bewitched you. Enough. A low voice came from behind. Miso suddenly trembled. Philin followed the voice and found that it was his father, Sir Schilt. Lady Irene is not inferior to the nobles. She only lacks an identity. You'll be rude if you continue. Father. Miso said loudly. Sir ignored his second son. I heard from the guards that you have news for me. Yes. Philin bowed. Then come to my study. Philin followed his father to the study on the second floor of the mansion. When he passed the hall, he took the opportunity to glance at the portrait hanging on the wall in the hall. The face of the blue-haired woman appeared in front of him again. It was almost the same as the person he saw in the convenience market. And unlike the other portraits, the color of this painting was particularly bright, and the details were much more delicate. Even the tear mole at the corner of her eye was clearly visible. After entering the study, Sir took the lead and said, I saw your wife in the autumn theater. She looked very good, and her acting was not inferior to Miss May's. It seems that you have a good life. Philin suddenly felt tears in his eyes. He did not expect his father to mention this first. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, Yes, we have our own residence in Border Town, and we plan to have a child after the end of this year's months of demons. That's good. Schilt slowly took a sip of tea. It shouldn't be easy to come from Border Town now. What news do you want to tell me? The Light of Dawn restrained his emotions. I met a woman in the town. She looks exactly like the person in the portrait in the hall. Sir's hand trembled and he almost knocked over the teacup. He looked up and widened his eyes. What did you say? Rare blue hair and a beautiful face. I'm sure I'm not mistaken, said Philin. Could she be a descendant of the person in the portrait? Impossible. That person is, he paused and then shook his head. It's impossible for her to have a descendant. Is that so? Philin lowered his head. Then maybe I'm wrong. You came all the way to Longsong's stronghold just for this? Yes, because I remember that you once expressed regret. Sir Schilt bowed his head and thought for a moment. Is it really the same? Except for the slightly different hair length. Philin thought for a moment. Everything else is exactly the same. You know, since I was born, I've only seen such a hair color in a portrait, so I pay special attention to it. She can't be a descendant of that person, Sir hesitated. But she could be the person in the portrait herself. His father's words made Philin almost unable to believe his ears. This idea was even more incredible than his own imagination. Herself? You mean, she has lived for more than 400 years? I didn't want to tell you this, he said as he got up. She's a witch. Since she's a witch, anything is possible. Come with me. Where to? In the basement. I have something I want to show you, said the Duke word by word. It's an inheritance from our ancestors, and it's also a relic she left behind. Chapter 377. Philin was no stranger to the basement of the Schilt mansion. When he was a child, he regarded this place as his own amusement park. It was very fun to rummage through all kinds of dusty boxes to find strange objects. Of course, because of this, he was often beaten by his father, and was even forbidden to enter the basement alone. However, Philin always found a way to sneak in. Sir took him into the innermost stone room, and saw that the walls were inlaid with fist-sized light blue crystals. Philin could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Each stone was actually a superior god's stone of retaliation. When he was a child, he didn't know this, but now he naturally understood what it meant. High-quality god's stone was very valuable, and a large one like this was worth at least 500 or 600 golden dragon stones. Was the Schilt family so rich? He suddenly remembered that the treasure map was also found in this room. The stone room was surrounded by a circle of boxes, and the layout was not much different from the scene in his memory. Sir Schilt took out a bunch of keys and opened the largest wooden box. With a squeaking sound, the house suddenly raised a cloud of dust. Philin held his breath and looked into the box. It was divided into several layers, similar to the dressing boxes used by noble ladies, and each layer was filled with gems of different colors. Is this the ancestors' legacy? I haven't visited this place for a long time, Sir sighed. Every time I see these magic stones, I think of the heavy past of the ancestors. Magic stones? Philin was surprised. Yes, they are precious objects that only witches can use. He nodded. It's a very long story. Our family was founded under the blessing of a witch. His father began to tell the history of the family, which was different from what he had heard in his childhood. The first ancestor Schilt did not come from the western region, but from the impassable mountain range, where no one had set foot in the wilderness. Philin gradually widened his eyes. He didn't expect that there was such an amazing secret hidden behind the portrait. The founder of the family, ancestor Agatha, had actually established a huge kingdom with many other witches. In the kingdom, they were in a ruling position, similar to the current nobles. The reason why the kingdom was destroyed was due to the attacks of the devils from hell. In the last battle, the survivors scattered in all directions. Agatha brought a group of people to the concealing forest stone tower to retrieve the experimental materials, while the other group followed the main army to Grey Castle. At that time, the kingdom's mainland was just a barren and desolate land. The ancestor is among the other group. Philin's throat was dry as he asked. Yes, he's the witch's butler. He should have gone to the forest with her, but he flinched and offered to stay behind to take care of the supplies, and the witch agreed to his request. Sir said in a low voice, "You should know what this means." Philin nodded. The housekeeper could be considered as the person the master trusted the most in the family apart from the family members. Most of the time, the housekeeper should live and die with the master, unless the master ordered otherwise. In a sense, offering to leave was no different from betrayal, even if the other party didn't refuse. After the ancestor arrived in the western region, he fell into deep regret and self-blame, and recorded all his feelings. Sir Schilt took out a black book from another box. The witch didn't come back in the end. After that, he cut off contact with the Union, left the refugee camp, and settled alone in this uncultivated area with a few servants. Philin took the black book, but he didn't immediately open it. Instead, he thought of a terrible thing. "So, you knew from the beginning that everything the church did was wrong?" If the witches were dedicated to fighting against the devil, why were they now advertised as the devil's minions? Obviously, there was a great secret behind this. I knew, but I couldn't do anything, Sir said calmly. If witches appeared in the territory, I would definitely hide them, but I couldn't save the witches in Stronghold. After all, the Duke of Ryan didn't think so, and he hated witches even more than the church. In addition, from the records of the later ancestors, we know that they had done the same thing, but they didn't tell the lucky ones who were rescued about the witch kingdom. What about them? Are they still in the family? How could it be possible? Of course they've all entered the grave. He spread out his hands. It's already very rare for them to live to 60 or 70 years old, but they're still human, and they'll also grow old. But you think that the ancestors are still alive? It's only a possibility. Witches have a variety of abilities, and they can't give birth, so I made this speculation. Philin thought for a moment, then changed the topic. Didn't the ancestor think of going to the concealing forest to look for ancestor Agatha? It's easier said than done. His father shook his head. Even the witches can't safely return, and ordinary mortals going there is no difference from courting death. In addition, 400 years ago, the western region was still a wasteland, with wild beasts and jungles everywhere. Just taking root was extremely difficult, and there was no time to take care of other things. But the ancestor did write this in his will, hoping that in the future, there will be descendants who can go to the concealing forest stone tower, even just to take a look. The light of dawn took a deep breath and opened the dusty record book. From the first page, he could feel the remorse between the lines. Many of the handwriting had become blurred over the years, but because of this, the heavy feeling was even more obvious. He didn't know how long it took, but he turned to the last page, where the content of the will was written. Perhaps it couldn't be called a will, but rather an unfulfilled wish. This was probably the reason why his father showed a regretful expression after drinking. As a former knight, he empathized with him. Do you need me to find her? Philin was silent for a moment, then asked, if she is Agatha herself, then she must live in the prince's castle. As far as I know, there are many witches gathered there. The witches are gathered in the castle? Sir said thoughtfully, no wonder Longsong Stronghold issued a recruitment notice for witches a few days ago. It seems that His Highness is determined to become the enemy of the church. Then he shook his head. No, you don't have to find her. Philin was slightly startled. Don't you want to see her? How can we let the ancestor come to see the younger generation? Sir Schilt smiled. Of course, we have to take the initiative to see her. Me? Yes, I will also go with you to Border Town. His father touched his chin and smiled. Take these things with you. If it is really Agatha herself, then the ancestor's last wish can be realized. To be continued. Chapter 378. What's this? Andrea asked while chewing the dried fish. Prince Roland of Greycastle was playing with something new again. He spliced the copper pipes together, asked Anna to melt the joints, and then asked Soroya to wrap it with a layer of soft magic products. At first glance, it looked like the pipes installed in the bathroom, but much larger. Each pipe was as thick as a person's thigh. Without the help of the hummingbird, it would be impossible for a person to lift it. Moreover, the copper pipes were not limited to 1 or 2 rooms. They ran horizontally through the whole castle and the witch house. They entered from the corner of the room, connected to a strange metal shutter along the bottom of the wall, and then went through to the next room. At the end of the room, they were connected to the vertical pipes. This huge project attracted many witches. Both the Sleeping Island Witch Union and the Sleeping Island Witch Union were very curious about it. What do you think? He smiled mysteriously. If you guess correctly, you'll have an extra portion of ice cream bread for dinner. Andrea's interest was instantly piqued. Ice cream bread. It was the most magical food here. 2 pieces of bread that were roasted crispy on the outside and tender on the inside were covered with a layer of sweet ice cream filling. She had never heard of such a thing in the Kingdom of Dawn. The first time she tasted it, she immediately fell in love with it. Even though she was repeatedly laughed at by Ashes, she still ate it with a blush. Otherwise, it would be a torture to just look at it on the plate. Are you going to supply water to the room? Ashes frowned. Andrea curled her lips in her heart. Copper was not a cheap metal. Since the small pipe in the bathroom could be used to supply water, why did it have to be so big? But recently, whenever she opened her mouth to refute, she would be blocked by Andreas, who said food is the best in its original taste. Moreover, she had said this in front of Lady Tilly. It was really inconvenient for her to deny it, so she had to pretend that she did not hear her superficial words. You're so short-sighted. Why do you need such a big pipe to supply water? Someone behind her said. His Highness would not do such a laborious thing. Brilliant. It was exactly the same as what she had imagined. Andrea's spirit was lifted. Apart from herself, only Miss Nightingale of the Witch Union dared to speak to an extraordinary in such a tone. She turned around and saw that the man was looking at Ashes with disdain, and his chin was raised at just the right angle. Nobles should have this kind of expression. Andrea secretly praised her. After coming to Border Town, the witch she felt the closest to was this mysterious woman. The skills Nightingale had shown during the rescue of the witches in the ruins were indeed extraordinary. She was also a noble like him, and even her hair color was very similar. After several sniping battles against hybrid demonic beasts on the city wall, the other party had also recognized his ability and even shared the dried fish with him, which was quite the aristocratic style. Most importantly, she didn't like Ashes at all. Although I don't know how Ashes offended her the first time she came to Border Town, but, isn't the enemy of my enemy my friend? Moreover, her personality was so compatible with his. You speak as if you already know the answer, Ashes shrugged. Of course I know. Nightingale raised the corner of her mouth. When His Highness was drawing the design, I was always in the office, and I saw all the drawings he drew. That's not fair. Mystery Moon muttered. She doesn't participate in the guessing. The prince's words made Nightingale's proud expression stiffen. I'll give you a hint, these pipes are only part of the system, you might as well go to other places, it will be easier to guess the answer. Goo! Maggie and Lightning immediately flew out of the room. The other witches were not willing to be left behind, and one by one they followed the direction of the pipes and scattered. Andrea deliberately fell behind everyone, and after they left, she gave Nightingale a wink, calling her to the door. What the hell is this? Andrea asked in a low voice. If I get the answer right, you can have half of the bread for dinner. I don't know. Nightingale's answer made her slightly stunned. Didn't you say that you've read all the drawings? Yes, it's like the Natural Science Theoretical Foundation, you can recognize the words on it, right? But can you understand what it means when it's all linked together? Ah. Andrea opened her mouth, but found that the other's words were completely reasonable. She had also read that book, and it was really no different from a heavenly book. If you can understand His Highness's intentions just by looking at the drawings, I'm afraid that in the Witch Union, only Anna has such an ability, Nightingale suggested. If you ask her, she will definitely be able to tell you the answer. After waiting for her to leave, Andrea hesitated again and again, but in the end, she still didn't call Anna out of the room. It wasn't because she was reserved or embarrassed, but because she was, in awe. She had never been afraid of the vicious gangsters, or the cruel and merciless judges, but she felt a heartfelt fear towards this less than 20-year-old girl. She remembered that once when she accidentally passed by the prince's office, she heard Anna talking to His Royal Highness. The content of the conversation, even now, gave her goosebumps. High parabola calculation, bringing in the parameters of the falling point to correct the orbit, as well as the transformation of kinetic energy in the ideal state, all of these made her suddenly freeze in place. Why is it that as a fellow witch, Anna can speak words that I can't understand at all so fluently? Since then, Andrea had a feeling of looking up to Anna, feeling that she was completely not the same kind of person as herself, but at the same level as Lady Tilly. Since she couldn't get an answer, she could only rely on herself. Following the prince's instructions, Andrea explored the rooms one by one. She found that in the completed rooms, the copper pipes were separated by a right-angle iron fence, as if to prevent people from touching the pipes. If it wasn't for the barbarian ashes, even if the copper pipes were touched, it wouldn't matter, right? Thinking of what Nightingale had said, His Royal Highness never does things that are strenuous and unrewarding, it seemed that these iron fences obviously had their own purpose. When she came to the first floor of the witch house, she made a new discovery. There was a bungalow between the castle and the witch house, and the copper pipes that led to the two buildings extended from here. Inside the bungalow was a huge iron box, the lower half of the box was hollow, and there was a huge chimney at the top. It looked like a stove used for cooking. She also saw a pipe directly connected to the well in the yard, which looked like the water supply device of a water tower. Wait. Is this used to boil water? But if the pipe is used to transport hot water, there is no need to make it so big, right? Andrea was puzzled, until the end she still couldn't figure it out. Before dinner, His Royal Highness gathered all the witches in the hall and said with a smile, "From today on, the castle's heating system will be officially used." Heating system? Ashes asked doubtfully. That's right. After the hot water is boiled in the boiler, the high-temperature steam will enter the room through the pipes and pass through the radiator to raise the temperature of the room. As long as the doors and windows are closed, the whole room will quickly warm up, the prince explained, compared to the fire bucket, which is inconvenient to move and needs to be opened to ventilate, otherwise there will be the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. The new heating system doesn't have to worry about this at all, and you can still enjoy the warmth of spring when you sleep. After the commissioning is finished, this heating system will gradually be popularized in the residential area. Then, apart from Anna, Soroya, and Hummingbird, who participated in the installation of the heating system, there is only one person who guessed the ice cream bread correctly tonight, and that is Tilly. During dinner, Andrea stared at Lady Tilly's smiling face as she ate the delicious food, completely forgetting her reservations as a noble. To be continued, M. Chapter 379. The boiler heating system was not a complicated thing. Its essence was to boil water, and then transmit the heat energy through the pipes to the room, and then spread it out through the radiator. The carrier of heat energy could be water or steam. Roland chose the latter because the upper limit of steam temperature was higher, and it was more convenient to circulate. As long as the boiler kept burning, the steam pressure would automatically fill every corner of the pipe with tiny high-temperature water droplets, and there was no need for a pump. Of course, steam heating was not without its disadvantages. The pipe was always under high pressure, and if the interface was not strong enough, it was easy to leak or even explode. The high-pressure steam of 200 or 300 degrees would tear the skin and flesh, so the installation quality was higher. Anna's black wire welding could ensure the strength of the interface, and with Soroya's coating, this disadvantage was undoubtedly reduced to a minimum. At the same time, Roland also installed an automatic pressure-reducing valve on the boiler. Its mechanical principle was the same as the centrifugal governor on a steam engine. When the pressure in the furnace was too high, the high-speed rotating flywheel would pull up the valve to exhaust and reduce the pressure. The last safety was located at the connection between the boiler and the two main heating pipes. He asked Anna to engrave several grooves around the copper pipe to reduce its strength, similar to a can. Even if the pressure valve was not opened normally, the explosion would occur in the boiler room, and it would not harm the people in the room. When the heating system was running, the scene in the castle was completely changed. The heavy and thick winter clothes were gone, and the witches had changed into the unlined autumn clothes. Looking at the colorful girls chatting and laughing in front of him, Roland felt that his work motivation had imperceptibly increased by 5%. Of course, these facilities were used for enjoyment, or in other words, to create a better working environment. The next project was related to the future of the Western region. That was to realize the artificial synthesis of ammonia, reduce the dependence on saltpeter, and raise the production of chemical explosives to a new height, so that it could meet the requirements of automatic firing weapons. If this goal could be achieved before the end of winter, it would undoubtedly put a heavy pressure on the planned spring offensive. Roland called Kyle, Sichi and Agatha to his office. "How is your cooperation these days?" he asked with a smile. One of them was the chief alchemist of Border Town. In addition to his incomparable passion for alchemy, he almost didn't care about the feelings and opinions of others. One of them came from the Witch Kingdom 400 years ago, and had the pride of being a member of the Quest Society, the highest research organization. Both of them were straightforward, and when put together, they were like barrels of gunpowder that would explode at the slightest touch. Roland was often worried that they would quarrel, but whether it was the nitro gunpowder or ammonia synthesis, both required the full cooperation of the two of them. Therefore, he had to ask about the situation first. If they did not get along, he would have to mediate. "Very good." Kyle's first sentence slightly surprised Roland. "Miss Agatha's ability is extremely helpful for chemical experiments. Now that I have found a stable synthesis temperature for nitroglycerin, there are no problems in the laboratory production, and I am currently testing the possibility of industrial production. It can be said that without the ice cup, none of this would be possible." "Oh, I was too busy with work, so I didn't inform you." He paused. "By the way, if you want to ask about this, can you let me go back to the lab now? I still have a lot of things to do." Is that so?" Roland looked at Agatha, who nodded. Mr. Kyle's knowledge is indeed different from ordinary people, especially his understanding of the elements, which is quite similar to that of the Quest Society. "Our cooperation is very pleasant, and if he were in the tequila, he would definitely be accepted by the Union. Are two straightforward people easier to get along with each other? It seems that I have worried for nothing, and why does the chief alchemist treat the witches better than me? It's so sad." Roland criticized in his heart, and then he cleared his throat. "In that case, I'm relieved. I called you here because I have a new research project to hand over to you." Hearing the word research, Kyle immediately became spirited. "Please go ahead. As I said before, there are many different gases in the air, and now it's time to make use of them." Roland roughly explained his idea. According to the elementary chemistry, oxygen and nitrogen occupy 99% of the components in the air. Now I need to separate these two gases for chemical production. Kyle thought for a moment and replied, "Do you mean to use their different characteristics, such as different boiling and melting points to separate them?" "Yes," Roland nodded approvingly. "Condense the air and then heat it up. The boiling point of nitrogen is lower than that of oxygen, so it will first be distilled from the liquid. Since this temperature is far lower than the freezing point, it's difficult to achieve with current conventional means, so we have to rely on Agatha's ability to achieve this." Turning air into liquid, Kyle said while stroking his beard. "It sounds very interesting. If the temperature is further reduced, they can even become solid, like ice cubes," Roland said with a smile. This was definitely a scene that contemporary alchemists had never imagined. Holding the seemingly illusory gas in one's hand, provided that it was well protected against freezing. Agatha was puzzled. "I've read some of that book, but when I froze the air, I didn't see it solidify into a variety of gases. Because they don't form a stratification phenomenon when mixed together, so it's difficult to distinguish them with the naked eye," Roland explained. "The first to be eliminated is carbon dioxide. Its freezing point is relatively high, but the amount of carbon dioxide in the air is extremely low, so you won't even notice it condensing into fine particles. Next is oxygen and nitrogen, which can perfectly blend with each other and show a light blue color. If not separated, it looks like a pure substance. In fact, liquid nitrogen should be colorless. What should we do?" "First prepare the fractionation vessel," the prince said with a smile. "This is a big project." There was no doubt that it was not enough to rely on Agatha alone. Glass was easy to break under repeated changes in temperature, so the container for liquid air could only be made of steel. This was not difficult for Anna, but a fully enclosed shell would make it impossible to observe the changes in liquid air when the temperature was raised. Therefore, it was necessary to use Sylvie's eye of magic to observe the scene inside the container, and then let Agatha record the specific amount of magic consumed when the liquid nitrogen was boiling, in order to obtain stable production temperature parameters. This preparation lasted for 3 days. When the vessel was completed, Roland personally went to the chemistry laboratory to guide the town's first oxygen and nitrogen separation experiment. Chapter 380. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go. Show.net provides you with wonderful novels to read. This experiment was not only of great practical significance, but it was also an excellent educational opportunity. Therefore, in addition to the participants Agatha, Sylvie, Chavez, and Kyle, Roland had also called over the other members of the Witch Union, Carter, Iron Axe, and Berev. In order to accommodate these 20 or so people, they had chosen the largest laboratory, the 5th laboratory. Out of consideration for the first time, the fractionation vessel wasn't too big. It was about the height of a person and 1 meter in diameter, similar to a tower. The inside of the container was divided into 3 layers. The bottom layer was used for air intake, and the top 2 layers were used for exhaust. Before the separation began, Roland gave everyone a simple chemistry lesson. He told them what might happen and asked them a few questions to find the answers for themselves. In addition to attracting the interest of the listeners, it also greatly enhanced the effectiveness of the lesson. This was a trick that chemistry teachers often used. In theory, when Agatha lowers the temperature inside the container, the air will gradually condense into a liquid and drip through the perforated partition to the bottom layer. So when you see fluid accumulating at the bottom, tell us. Since he couldn't see it directly, he had to rely on Sylvie to observe through the container and describe the changes, so Roland explained this part in great detail. Sylvie nodded skeptically. Can you really see the liquid appear? Could it be the water vapor in the jar? Don't worry, liquid air is light blue, completely different from water vapor, Roland said, waving his hand. And at that temperature, water vapor has already solidified into ice crystals. He then gestured to Agatha. Let's begin. Wait, don't we need to plug up the hole at the bottom of the container? She asked. We'll block it later. Otherwise, there's too little air in the tank, and we won't be able to see any obvious changes. Since it was just an experiment, Roland chose the simplest way to inhale air. When the temperature in the tank dropped rapidly, the pressure would also drop, and the air from the outside would constantly flow into the tank. During normal production, the loss outweighed the gain, because the air conditioner would constantly leak out and waste energy. However, Agatha used magic power, and the cooling efficiency was far better than any refrigerator, so Roland did not bother to prepare an air pump to inflate it. Agatha took a deep breath and pressed her hands on the fractionation column. In a few seconds, a whistling sound came from the air inlet, which was the sound of the air rushing in. Layers of white frost appeared around the mouth of the tube at a speed visible to the naked eye and continued to expand. The moisture in the air quickly condensed under the overflowing low temperature and adhered to the outer wall of the container. Anna turned the black flame into threads and cleaned up the ice crystals that were constantly thickening. After a while, Sylvie said in surprise, I see some liquid on the partition, but most of it is white frost. The white frost could be water vapor, or it could be crystallized carbon dioxide, Roland explained. Considering that the carbon dioxide content in the air is very low, most of it should be water vapor. During production, before the air was pumped into the fractionation column, it had to be dried first. Otherwise, the condensed water vapor would easily block the separator and vent, which would lower the production efficiency. About 15 minutes later, Sylvie reported that the bottom of the tank was filled with blue liquid. Roland then asked Soroya to block the air inlet and seal it with a coating. Next was the key heating. Due to the different boiling points of nitrogen and oxygen, the nitrogen would reach the boiling point first, turn into gas, and escape upward to achieve separation. Roland didn't remember the specific value of this temperature, nor did he have any way to measure it. He could only rely on Agatha. The specific behavior was that when gas was discharged from the vent at the top of the fractionation column, the remaining liquid at the bottom would become bluer and bluer, which meant that the purity of liquid oxygen was constantly increasing. Fortunately, Agatha was familiar with the control of magic power. She accurately adjusted the cooling range and slowly raised the temperature. After a while, Sylvie also noticed that the liquid surface was boiling. The coated pipe that was connected to the water began to bubble, and Kyle quickly collected several bottles of gas using the drainage gas collection method. Is this nitrogen? Lily curled her lips. I can't see anything at all. This is my first premise, Roland asked. How do you prove that it is different from air? Ignite, Tilly answered first. According to elementary chemistry, combustion requires oxygen. If it is another gas, it should be able to instantly extinguish the burning wood. We'll know after cooling it down to liquid again. Agatha thought for a moment and said, didn't you say that liquefied nitrogen is colorless? Or we can guide the remaining liquid out of the container to prove that the latter is pure oxygen, which can also prove the diversity of air components, Anna said. The scene had completely become a stage for the performance of the top students. One test method after another was proposed and then discussed with each other. There were only a few voices left in the laboratory. Roland looked around and found that Nightingale, Andrea, Maggie, and the other witches, as well as the City Hall director and Chief Knight Carter, were all at a loss. Iron Axe, the commander of the First Army, always maintained the same expression. Probably no matter what Roland said, he would always nod in agreement. Well, Roland sighed in his heart. It seemed that this chemistry class was slightly beyond the syllabus. If there were still people who could feel His Highness' joy, perhaps only Kyle, Sichi and Chavez were left. Your Highness, this is really magical, the young alchemist exclaimed. You have proved the correctness of elementary chemistry. I'm afraid that no alchemist would have expected that even the air around them is so complicated. With pure oxygen, will we be able to observe even more intense oxidation reactions? I have a lot of experiments that I want to do, Kyle said excitedly. Roland nodded, but suddenly another idea popped up in his mind. Nitrogen was the most important raw material for synthetic ammonia. Under the conditions of high temperature and high pressure catalysts, it could react with hydrogen to produce ammonia. The latter could not only be used to make nitrogen fertilizer, but could also be used to synthesize nitrogen oxides and thus produce nitric acid. But in order to realize this process, there was still a lot of work that needed to be done, such as an air pump, a vacuum tank, and a series of complex reaction equipment. Even if paper could provide the function of a catalyst, it still needed to be tested repeatedly. Now, since he had pure oxygen and pure nitrogen, why not directly produce nitric oxide? Admittedly, the chemical industry chose to use ammonia to produce nitric acid because the reaction between oxygen and nitrogen was an energy-absorbing reaction, so it couldn't be carried out spontaneously. It needed an external supply of energy, such as an electric discharge, through the instantaneous heating of the gas to thousands of degrees by an electric arc. This was also the reason why the soil was more fertile where there was frequent thunder. Because of this method required a lot of equipment and consumed a lot of energy, so it wasn't suitable for formal production. But if there was an urgent need to increase production capacity, this production method was the most efficient. It didn't even need a catalyst, and only needed to continuously discharge, or use other means to reach the high temperature produced by the electric arc naturally. Roland thought of Blackfire. Blackfire's heating efficiency wasn't any worse than the electric arc, and its burden on Anna was also extremely low. As long as the nitrogen and oxygen were purified and poured into a closed reactor according to the ratio, nitric oxide could be continuously produced. He decided to try this method. Chapter 381. A Genius in a Second. Remember love? The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Reload faster. Don't shake your fingers. Insert the bullets into the loader one by one. Your teammates in the front need you to load the bullets. If you're too slow, the enemy will rush over and kill you. Don't stare at other places. Just look at your fingers. As long as your teammates are still shooting, don't stop. In the camp of the First Army, Lord Brian was loudly urging the recruits to practice loading. Nail was also one of them. He was not a recruit, but a veteran of the First Army. Since the militia had defeated the demonic beasts under the leadership of His Royal Highness, he had joined the militia at the strong request of Iron Head. According to Iron Head, it was much more promising to fight against the enemy with a gun and protect His Royal Highness and Miss Nana than to mine in the mines for a lifetime. Soon after Nail was drafted, the militia was reorganized into the First Army. In addition to fighting against demonic beasts, he followed His Royal Highness Roland and His Excellency Iron Axe to defeat the great nobles that he had never dared to dream of and overthrew the throne of Duke Ryan. Even the army of the new King Timothy could not step into Border Town. After several battles, he had become a captain of the Flintlock team. However, according to the First Army's custom, whenever a large number of recruits joined, some veterans would be arranged to be inserted into the newly formed team as instructors, accompany the recruits to practice, eat and live with them. At first, Nail was not very willing to be selected, which meant that he could not stand in the front line and fight together with familiar companions. However, thinking that when he joined the army, he was also instructed by a veteran member of the militia, so he had to accept the task. At that time, the veteran who instructed his team was Lord Brian, who had now become the commander of the 1st Battalion of the Flintlock team. Nail hoped that one day in the future, he would be able to stand in front of nearly 1,000 people and give orders with the medal awarded by His Royal Highness. Iron Head was right. This job was much better than operating the steam engine in front of the mine. "My lord, how long are we going to practice this?" A young man in the team that he was responsible for muttered, "It's still snowing. Practice until you can complete this movement within 5 breaths with your eyes closed." Nail stopped in front of him. "Your name is Haimeng, right? Remember to shout, report, before you speak. This is the rule of the First Army." "Sir," the short man beside Heeman shouted, his hands still moving. "Are there eggs for dinner tonight?" His words caused everyone in the queue to swallow their saliva. Nail could not help but curl up the corner of his mouth. The reason why these recruits from the northern region and the southern territory of the kingdom could maintain good discipline even in the snowy weather was not only the continuous training and stick education for half a month, but also enough food. Oatmeal and salted meat jerky were necessities. Occasionally, there would be a small piece of pickled fish and even an egg. However, the latter would only appear in meals after fighting against demonic beasts or training in the wild. "You'll have to ask the demonic beasts whether or not they'll come looking for trouble in Border Town," he shrugged. "What's your name?" "Ai Ku, Your Excellency. The bullet in your hand has been stuffed for a long time. Even the old granny next door is more flexible than you." Nail stopped smiling and said solemnly, "If you're still like this before the end of the training, not to mention eggs, I'll even cancel your share of oatmeal and meat." Everyone immediately lowered their heads. It seemed that no one wanted to be banned from eating dinner as a punishment. Just then, a bell suddenly rang from the lookout post on the city wall. The demonic beasts were attacking. "Stop the training!" Brian shouted. "All team instructors, lead your men into the city wall area and prepare for battle." "Did you hear that?" Nail urged. "Take the ammunition in your hands and don't leave anyone behind. Line up and climb the city wall as you usually do in the training. Our position is at the 4th section of the city wall. Move." "I didn't expect that I could really eat eggs," he thought to himself. After arriving at the predetermined position, Nail saw that the flintlocks were ready. Facing the looming black tide in the distance, they calmly checked the guns for the last time and then put the barrels on the battlement. Nail could not help but feel a little regretful. He could have held a revolving rifle and taught these beasts a hard lesson. Bullets were inserted into the loader and then placed in a position where the people in the front row could easily reach. There were 1 or 2 people behind each veteran who were responsible for loading. If necessary, they could shoot all 5 bullets at one go. The firepower of this rifle was much stronger than that of the flintlock they had used before. "Look, the witches are coming." Hai Meng whispered. They're so beautiful, Ai Ku murmured. Before I came here, I heard the church's description and thought they were ugly and horrible. Is that all you'll notice? Hai Meng snorted disdainfully. You saw it in the last battle. The woman with a giant sword on her back cut down the hybrid demonic beast with one blow. If only I had such power. In case it's really the power of the demons, bullshit. Nail shouted. Miss Nana is also a witch. Is she a demon? Then he lowered his voice and said, if you dare to say this in front of the veterans of the First Army, I promise you'll be black and blue the next day. She's the town's angel and the power of God. Do you understand? Now put all your attention on reloading, this is not a practice. After teaching these talkative guys a lesson, Nail took some time to glance at the front. This time, the demonic beasts were not much different from the usual ones. It seemed that it would not take long to clean up the battlefield. Wait, what was that? There seemed to be a huge figure among the black tide. At first, he thought it was a siege beast with a tortoise shell, but the figure seemed to be bigger and moved much faster. When the figure got closer, Nail could not help but widen his eyes. It was a huge demonic beast that he had never seen before. Its huge fangs, which were almost thicker than a human's body, were in front of its face like a sickle. Its limbs, which were comparable to stone pillars, splashed layers of snow mist as it ran. Almost every step it took made the earth tremble slightly. The more than 4-meter-high city wall was not even as high as its jaw. If it directly bumped into the mud wall, it was afraid that the mud wall would immediately be torn apart. Artillery. There was no doubt that the effect of flintlocks on this huge monster was extremely limited. Only the big guns of the artillery team could stop it. And the most powerful of them was undoubtedly the new long-barreled cannons on the 6th section of the city wall. My God, look over there. Behind him came the screams of the recruits. What's that monster? God bless us. Is it a demon from hell? Shut up and continue to do what you should do. Nail swallowed his saliva and looked at the position of the new cannon. The barrel, which reflected the silver light, was already moving. The flat muzzle slowly turned and aimed at the direction where the giant beast came from. A dazzling flame flashed, followed by a deafening roar. Chapter 382. Nail's heart suddenly tightened. At that moment, time seemed to slow down. He prayed in his heart that he would hit the target and stared at the giant demonic beast without blinking. Even when he recovered his breath, the beast was still safe and sound and was still running forward. After a few breaths, a snow column was raised far away from the monster. This is bad. Nail's heart suddenly sank. Because the giant beast was not heading for the 6th section of the city wall, there was an angle between it and the cannons. The long-barreled cannons had to constantly adjust the angle and estimate the speed of the beast's movement so as to shoot in advance. Otherwise, the cannonball would hit the back of the target. According to the shooting speed of the field cannons, they only had one last chance before the monster broke through the city wall. Nail could already see the thick fur and the bloody mouth under the fangs of the enemy. The witches were coming here, obviously intending to intercept the monster. But the 4 of them together were not even as thick as one of the monster's legs. Could they do that with magic power alone? He was so anxious that he even wanted to run to the 6th section of the city wall and remind the cannons to aim forward. However, the supervisors standing on both sides of the city wall made him suppress this impulse. If he left the garrison position now, it was likely that he would be regarded as a deserter. Lord Iron Axe had repeatedly stressed that this kind of behavior that might cause the defense line to slacken was absolutely forbidden. Once found, the supervisors could directly shoot to death. The demonic beast running in the front had already entered the shooting range of the revolving rifle. A series of crackling sounds came from the top of the city wall. Nail had no choice but to continue his task, placing the loaded cartridges beside the shooter. At this time, the second earth-shaking roar sounded again. This time, it was only 3 or 4 breaths after the long-barreled cannons had fired. So fast. Nail looked at the 6th section of the city wall in surprise. The smoke above the barrel had not dissipated, and there was still smoke coming out of the muzzle, like a lit silver pipe. But the more shocking thing was yet to come. He did not even have time to observe whether the shot had hit the enemy or not before the dazzling flame appeared again. The 3rd shot. Oh my God, don't they need to reload? He only saw 4 or 5 people busy behind the barrel, but no one had ever approached the muzzle. It seemed that this cannon was completely different from those stubby field cannons. It was more like a revolving rifle that could fire continuously. And this time, the attack was effective. Nail did not see the shell being shot into the monster's body. The first thing he saw was a cloud of blood mist bursting out from the side of the giant demonic beast. In addition to the scattered black blood, there were also torn fur and large pieces of flesh. At the same time, the demonic beast trembled fiercely, and its whole body seemed to deflate a bit. Ripples appeared on its sturdy fur like the surface of water. But he suspected that it was an illusion, because the next moment, the demonic beast's sunken body returned to normal, but the monster's eyeballs were squeezed out of the depression, and at the same time, a black and white viscous substance was sprayed out. There wasn't even a dying roar. The giant beast fell to the ground on its side with a dull thud. It was not until then that Nail found where the shell had hit. There was a big hole in its body near its neck. Although the hole was insignificant compared to its burly body, it was hard to associate the hole with the fatal blow just now. Wisps of green smoke came out of the hole, and the surrounding fur was burnt black. The monster from hell died just like that. Nail could not hold back his excitement and vented his previous worries into a roar. Long live His Highness! Even such a terrible and ferocious enemy could not resist the powerful weapon invented by His Highness. Except for the new cannon, he could not think of any other way to kill this burly hybrid demonic beast. Even if the witches could do it, they would not be able to do it so neatly. Further thinking, in a sense, His Highness had given them the supreme power that was comparable to the witches. This cry was responded by more people. Like a primer, it soon ignited other people's emotions. At first, it was the new recruits who followed the cry, and then the veterans could not help but clench their fists. Then loud cheers broke out on the top of the city wall. Long live His Highness! Roland didn't get the news until the battle was over. He put on a wool coat and rushed to the western section of the city wall. The giant body of the demonic beast was still lying quietly in the snow, and the black blood melted the surrounding snow into black water. It seemed that no matter how terrible the appearance of these monsters was, they were just carbon-based creatures. In front of gunpowder and steel, they were no different from thin paper. After the solid pointed bullet hit the target's body, it lost its balance and rolled, transmitting the kinetic energy to the whole body of the target, and finally pierced through the body. As seen at the scene, the other side of the body of the target was completely opened, its internal organs and broken bones scattered on the ground, and even its head, the hardest part, was shattered by the energy shock and collapsed. However, he was also a little worried. The strength of the bones of living creatures was limited. This thing was obviously several times larger than an elephant. How did it support its body without being crushed by its own weight? That was why the bodies of land animals were much smaller than those of sea creatures. Gravity was an insurmountable threshold. Could all of this be related to magic as well? He remembered that Nightingale had mentioned that she could see magic power flowing in the bodies of some hybrid demonic beasts. How could it be? Agatha, who followed him here, widened her eyes. Isn't this the fearful beast of hell? What is that? The name of the hybrid demonic beast? Roland asked curiously. Has it appeared in the fertile plains before? Yes, when they appear in groups, they are extremely difficult enemies for both witches and demons. Many towns have been trampled to the ground by the fearful beasts of hell. Agatha's voice sounded a little hoarse. But they can only be seen near the arrival of the bloody moon. The arrival of the bloody moon? Roland suddenly remembered the record in the ancient book: when the bloody moon appears in the sky, the gates of hell will open again. He frowned. What do you mean? According to the records from the first battle of divine will, it was the time when the magic power was the most abundant. The appearance of witches would usher in a peak, but at the same time, the demons and demonic beasts would become extremely powerful. Agatha said nervously. I've carefully read the history book you gave me. According to the time, it should be at least 20 to 50 years before the arrival of the bloody moon. It's impossible for such a monster to appear. But it still appeared, Roland said in a low voice. What does this mean? It means we don't have much time. Chapter 383. Roland was startled by the phrase, "Time is running out," but he was slightly relieved after he understood. Don't stop in the middle of a sentence, okay? It's so creepy. Do you think 5 years is a long time? Agatha frowned. This pattern was accurate in the first and second battles of divine will, but I don't know why it's shortened now, and it may become even shorter. I thought you would say the bloody moon will come this winter. Roland shrugged. According to the current development progress, he would be able to popularize brand new firearms throughout the army in a year. As long as the enemy was not invulnerable, the war was not impossible. The only thing he needed to pay attention to was that the construction of the territory must be developed to the extent that it could support a protracted war. This required a relatively high standard of land, population, and resources, as well as enough strategic depth to allow a temporary retreat in case of defeat to preserve effective forces. Therefore, the difficulty was not in weapons, but in the construction of 2 or 3 industrial cities to provide a steady stream of population, arms, and food for the war. Logistics guaranteed victory, and personnel guaranteed logistics. In summary, he found that what he most lacked were reliable leadership, cadres, and clerks. Without these, even if he unified Greycastle, he could not integrate it into a complete war machine, and the nobles might even drag him down. Sure enough, the countries that could fight were all countries with a higher level of education. What's the name of this weapon? Agatha suddenly changed the topic. I remember you called it a 152 mm stronghold. Standard stronghold artillery, Roland added. There will be a naval artillery version in the future. If you can fill the entire city wall with such weapons before the bloody moon appears, we may be able to resist the attack of the demons. According to Kyle Sichi, what I did in the chemistry laboratory is also part of the artillery, right? Agatha seemed to have made up her mind. I'll do my best to produce liquid nitrogen and liquid oxygen for you, as long as you can. Don't worry, he comforted her. We'll defeat the demons. Is that all you have to do today? Evelyn dipped her finger into the wine in the jar and dipped it into her tongue. The spiciness seemed to have intensified. According to His Royal Highness's requirements, the purer the wine, the better. The best wine could not even contain any water, and every drop would be pure and mellow. Although she felt that the wine she brewed was getting closer and closer to His Royal Highness's requirements, it was getting further and further away from the word delicious. Yes, thank you for your hard work. The manager of the winery put a number on the jar and nodded to her. Please send my regards to His Highness. Can these really be sold? Evelyn was puzzled. Based on her experience in running a tavern, she was afraid that very few people could accept such a spicy taste. Well, I don't know, the man smiled. But every once in a while, someone will come and take a batch away, so I think there should be people who like it. Evelyn felt relieved. If no one was willing to drink this, not only would His Highness fail, but she would also lose her value. Fortunately, it was not what she had thought. It seemed that His Highness was indeed worthy of being born in a big noble family. He could really grasp the taste of the nobles. She smiled, then I'll go first. Leaving the winery, Evelyn walked through the cold and windy streets back to the castle. The warm air immediately surrounded her. The inside and outside of the house were like 2 different worlds. She took a deep breath, took off her coat, and let the warmth come closer to her. This kind of comfortable life was simply unimaginable in the past. During the winter, she would either have to huddle with her family around the brazier, or curl up under the quilt. Like the scene in the castle, what was the difference between it and the kingdom of God, which the church claimed was like spring all year round? Moreover, His Highness also said that he wanted to popularize the heating system in ordinary residential areas, so that the people could stay away from the cold of the months of demons. She did not know how many believers of the church had arrived in the kingdom of God, but here, the witches, who were known as the devil's minions, and ordinary civilians were the first to experience this. If the group of believers knew about this, they would probably gnash their teeth in envy. His Royal Highness was really an omnipotent person. Passing through the hall, Andrea, Ashes, and Shavy were playing poker. 1 against 8. I can't afford it. 1 against 2. I won, Andrea said with a proud smile. Ashes still has 6 cards, the most left. Quickly hand over the ice cream promissory note. Then she turned her head and waved at Evelyn. Hey, do you want to play together? Evelyn could not help but be curious. What's an ice cream promissory note? It's a bet. Andrea waved her hand. The one who loses the most promissory notes has to hand over the next ice cream bread to the winner. How about it? Let's have a try. Evelyn was quite hesitant. This was a rare opportunity to talk with a combat witch. On Sleeping Island, whether it was Andrea or Ashes, they were second only to Lady Tilly. Usually, they would rarely see each other, let alone take the initiative to invite her to participate in their activities. Moreover, Fight the Landlord was really interesting. The rules were simple, but it was full of changes, and it also required the cooperation of teammates, so it could easily be played for a whole day. But, the final exam is coming soon, don't you want to review it? Are you referring to the basic homework assessment that night? Andrea pouted. They're all very simple questions. I don't even need to read a book to answer them. The other two nodded. That's right. Andrea was a nobleman, so she was more knowledgeable than the others, while Ashes and Shavy could also read and write, so it seemed that she was the most backward one. I better not play. She hesitated for a moment. You continue, I'll go back to my room to read. Leaving the 3 slightly surprised people behind, Evelyn quickly ran back to the witch house, opened the wooden door of her residence, and found Candle sitting at the table in the living room, practicing arithmetic problems behind the textbook. You're back. Yes, seeing Candle immersed in her practice, she suddenly felt a lot more at ease. How's the review? Not bad, the nature and arithmetic parts are a little difficult to understand, Candle said with a smile. How about you? Me too, Evelyn nodded. We'll collect the parts we don't understand, and ask Miss Anna tonight. Okay. According to Scroll, these books were written by His Highness Roland himself, and are also a part of his knowledge. If I can master these, I can also have a part of him that is omnipotent, right? Evelyn thought, compared to the ability that was determined by birth, at least in this aspect, I can rely on hard work to make progress. Even if the nobles no longer like to drink spicy liquor, I can still serve as a teacher in the territory, and not be useless. For this reason, she opened the textbook almost as soon as she had time, gnawing on those esoteric vocabulary and calculations. Anna, Scroll, and Vendy's rooms were all places she often went to. Her last exam results were at the bottom. This time she firmly believed that it wouldn't be the same. So, first set a small goal, to surpass Maggie. She said to herself. Chapter 384. The day of the final exam arrived quickly. The witches sat in the hall, waiting for Teacher Scroll to hand out the exam papers. Andrea elegantly trimmed her nails with a knife, her mind already drifting to dinner. According to His Highness Roland, the first semester would come to an end after the exam today. To celebrate, everyone would get a piece of ice cream bread. This meant that she would get to eat more than one piece of bread. These days, whenever she had time, she would play landlord with Ashes and Shavy. This kind of game required a certain level of strategy and skill, and was somewhat similar to the popular game of beasts chess used by the upper nobles. Both of them paid particular attention to playing to their strengths and avoiding their weaknesses. In this aspect, she believed that she was not inferior to Lady Tilly, let alone Ashes, and the facts proved this point. Currently, she had 6 IOUs for ice cream bread, 4 of which were from Ashes and 2 of which were from Shavy. In other words, as long as His Highness added this delicacy to the dessert, the 2 would have to give it to him. Today was obviously a good day, and when dinner came, she would be able to enjoy 3 pieces of ice cream bread, which would be enough to fill her stomach. As for the exam, Idalia was naturally prepared. Ever since she found out about this, she asked Sylvie about the situation of the last test, and even did the test herself. She found that the exam was very simple, probably similar to the Noble's knowledge initiation, which mainly focused on literacy and word recognition. Some of the so-called arithmetic knowledge was the simplest calculation of profit and loss, which was not as good as the accountant, let alone the financial and trade calculations of the family. In this aspect, she was recognized as a genius in the family, and she could already check the account books at the age of 15. Doing everything to the best of her ability was the demeanor of a noble. The exam papers were quickly distributed. There were 3 questionnaires in total. Andrea quickly glanced at them and raised her head. The 3 papers were written on the kingdom's language test, basic arithmetic, and elementary nature. Very good, exactly the same as last time. She could not help but smile, spread open the kingdom's language test paper, and picked up the quill pen to write. In only a quarter of an hour, she finished answering the questions on the paper. Although the range of vocabulary was wider than last time, and there were a few more strange tests, such as reading comprehension and closed test, these were not difficult for her. All he had to do was to answer the questions and complete the sentences after he understood the content. He was just deliberately mystifying things. Next was basic arithmetic. At the beginning, it was still a simple calculation of profit and loss, but gradually, Andrea slowed down. What did that mean? 2 intersecting lines and a few points on top of them. Describe it with equations. Her heart suddenly tightened, and the feeling of reading natural science theoretical basis came to her again. Why did she know every word, but she didn't know what they meant when they were connected? The next few questions were the same. Andrea felt beads of sweat on her forehead. She took a deep breath, held her breath, and quietly turned her head to look at Nightingale in the back row. As a fellow noble, could Nightingale give her some hints? However, the other party's expression sent a chill down her spine. Nightingale stared at the paper in a daze, her quill pen dangling from her mouth, her eyes unmoving for a long time. Could it be that the questions were too difficult? Lady Tilly did not participate in the exam, and the legendary talented Miss Anna was also nowhere to be seen. The people around her were still competing with the first page, so there was no way for them to use as reference. After about another quarter of an hour, everyone began to turn to the second paper. Even so, the pens in their hands did not stop for even a moment. Even Maggie kept writing. Oh my God, she even held the quill in the wrong way. It was like she was holding a claw in her fist. How could she answer the questions like that? Andrea finally could not hold it in anymore. She pretended that she had finished answering the basic arithmetic paper and turned to the last paper, elementary nature. However, compared to the simple questions and answers from last time, this time there were numbers and symbols that she did not understand. Wait, does this also need to be calculated? She suddenly felt that the development of things had deviated from her expectations. The only good thing was that Ashes had stopped writing a long time ago. Obviously, she was also at her wit's end about these questions. But, damn it, she thought bitterly. What's so good about winning against a big fool with muscles for brains? In the midst of her anxiety, Scroll announced the end of the exam. Andrea leaned back in her chair and watched the papers being taken away. For a moment, the 3 ice creams in front of her didn't taste so good anymore. Your Highness, these are all the papers. Scroll put a stack of papers on the desk. Do you really want to check the results yourself? Yes, Roland said with a smile. Sometimes, reading papers is also a kind of pleasure. For example, he could see many strange answers, or capture the pain and suffering of the answers between the lines. These were all spiritual food in his spare time. Let me help you calculate the scores. Then I'll have to trouble you. He nodded and then shouted, Nightingale, don't peek. I knew it. Nightingale appeared from the recliner and curled her lips. Why didn't Anna take the exam? Didn't her studies come to an end? All the sisters of the Witch Union should have participated. Roland couldn't help laughing. Because she and Scroll came up with these papers. Her voice choked. After a long time, she said, What about your sister? Tilly. She acted as the examiner and read the papers in advance to see if there was anything overlooked. The prince spread out his hands. By the way, she got full marks. Nightingale's figure suddenly looked very heavy. Roland shook his head helplessly and began to mark the papers. When all the results were tabulated, he stretched himself. The Sleeping Island witches had made great progress in this final exam. Candle, Evelyn, and Sylvie had all passed. Evelyn had improved the most, from 5 points last time to 62 points this time. Although she was still the lowest among the three, it was obvious that she had put in a lot of effort. However, the results of the three new combat witches were generally low. None of them had scored more than 50 points. It was probably because of the short teaching time and the fact that the proportion of points for the national language had decreased, so it was understandable that their results were not ideal. However, Nightingale was very bad. She had been learning with the others, but the total score of the three exams was lower than the last time, which made Roland not know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that learning was really a kind of talent, and sometimes it couldn't be forced. The only thing that surprised him was Maggie. She didn't get most of the math and natural calculations right, and the formulas she used didn't match. However, she got 90% of the multiple-choice questions and true/false questions right. In the end, she still managed to get 63 points, which was quite incredible. How did she manage to do that? Roland was puzzled for a while. Chapter 385. Hermes Cathedral, Tower of Babel. Maine, who had become the new supreme pontiff, was quietly listening to the reports of the three bishops in a secret room. In addition to the old Archbishop Taifun, the two newly promoted Archbishops Soli Dal and Air were respectively from the army of judges and the arbitral tribunal. The former was a brave and skillful presiding judge who had accumulated an extremely high reputation during his 25 years of service in the army. The latter was Heather's adjutant, and it could be said that he had taken over the position of his predecessor. This year during the months of demons, the orphans in the kingdom of endless winter have been accepted very smoothly. The nobles in all the big cities have completely turned to the church. Currently, the number of orphans sent to the old holy city has exceeded the target by 3 times. Taifun sighed. This is also the only good news recently. The nobles were always like this. Once they saw the situation was not right, it was easier for them to change sides than to drink water. Maine nodded. This is only the first year, and there will be more and more in the future. If we can occupy the whole continent, the number of people accepted every year can easily fill a new city. I hope so. He sighed. Since the beginning of the heavy snow, how many large-scale attacks have we encountered from the demonic beasts? 6 times, Soli replied. 6 times, more than 100 judgment warriors have fallen on the defensive line. Taifun's tone was somewhat heavy. 10 people from the God's punishment army have also died. In the coming year, the demonic beasts' attacks will only be more fierce. Compared to fighting the demons, this is already considered easy. El spread out his hands. Although I haven't personally seen how powerful the demons are, the Holy Book seems to describe them as invincible. I say, is it really necessary to be stubborn here until the end? What do you mean by that? Soli frowned. God has shown us the direction and given us power. As believers, instead of sticking to our faith, we should turn around and run away. Don't argue. Maine knocked on his scepter. Elle had worked with Heather for more than 10 years and had also developed a bad temper. Looking at the two, he could not help but think of the old partners Tayfun and Heather. He looked at the old bishop and found that the latter was also looking at him, as if he had the same thought. Our ultimate goal is to continue the human race, and to achieve this goal, there is no other way but to defeat the enemy. Yes, Your Holiness. The two bowed their heads respectfully. However, he was not sure if he could defeat the demons by staying in Hermes. Thinking of Brian's request, Maine felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. The fearful beast of hell had already appeared, and the demons would arrive in 5 years. He would be able to witness the battle of divine will in his lifetime, and he would not be able to entrust the task to his successor like O'Brien had done. Every time he thought about this, he would be unable to eat or sleep in peace. In fact, he had also thought of leaving a way out for himself. After swallowing Garcia's black sail fleet, he didn't order the burning of the ships or publicly hang all the rebels. Instead, he imprisoned all of them. Apart from a few leaders and a large number of scapegoats from the slums who were pushed to the execution ground, most of the sailors were now in the kingdom of Everwinter's harbor, under the custody of their most reliable subordinates. If the line of defense was completely lost, the fjords would be their last refuge, even if retreating to the Channel Islands meant struggling at death's door with no possibility of a comeback, at least they could live the rest of their lives. After all, human beings had tried their best twice, but they still failed to defeat the demons, right? Maine did not pay much attention to the subsequent discussion on how the church should develop and stabilize the rule of the kingdom of Wolfheart. After the three finished their discussion, he replied absent-mindedly, "Let's do as you said. Today's meeting is over." "Yes, Your Holiness." The three bishops stood up and saluted. Maine left the secret room and walked to the pivotal secret area accompanied by the guards. According to the plan, a new batch of Judgment Army soldiers would be transformed into God's Punishment Army today, which was his main concern. Whether it was defending or retreating, these powerful warriors would be the greatest guarantee that his orders would be carried out. But before that, he had to deal with an additional problem. Stepping on the stone stairs, Maine entered the pivotal secret area and turned into the prison corridor located in the middle of the area. The last time he came here was to secretly execute King Wimbledon III of Greycastle. The corridor was still extremely cold. The burning turpentine torches on both sides emitted a dim yellow light. The end of the corridor was pitch black, as if it was the entrance to a bottomless abyss. Many people who were put in prison could not leave this place until they died. Maine walked to the front of cell 85 and signaled the guard to open the door. The heavy wooden door made a harsh friction sound, which startled a burst of wailing and crying in this deathly silent place. But as the cell door was closed again, all the wailing sounds were isolated outside. Through the iron bars, he saw Zero's figure. The pure witch had her back to the entrance. Her upper body was naked, and her hands were handcuffed to the iron bars above her head. She had to tiptoe to touch the ground. There were dozens of bright red whip marks on her fair back, and the blood flowing down had already coagulated. How did the reprimand whip of the arbitral tribunal taste? Maine asked. "I hope it can make you understand the meaning of obedience." Zero moaned in a low voice as if she had just woken up from a dream. She slightly tilted her head and said, "It turns out that His Holiness the Supreme Pontiff has come." "When you say obedience, do you mean obedience to you or to maintain a respectful attitude towards other bishops?" Her slightly frivolous tone made Maine frown. But when he thought that he was now His Holiness the Supreme Pontiff, which was very different from his previous position as a bishop, he suppressed the displeasure in his heart. After this lesson, she should also understand that he now had the right to take her life. "It's obedience to my orders. When I ask you to assist other bishops to complete a task, you also have to obey their instructions. Is that so?" She said noncommittally, since it's your request, I'll naturally do it. Untie her handcuffs, Maine ordered the guard. After a long period of handcuffs, her hands were almost pulled out of their sockets and hung limply, as if she had no strength at all. The Supreme Pontiff used his scepter to lift her clothes and threw them on her shoulder. Next, I have a task for you to do. Follow me. Zero let the clothes hang in front of her and followed him out of the prison corridor unconcernedly. This year's months of demons are likely to last for 5 months, which is a difficult challenge for the Holy City and even more so for other places affected by the months of demons. Maine walked to the end of the mechanism area, passed through a long and narrow passage with iron walls, and once again arrived in front of the elevator cage. Since being crowned as the Supreme Pontiff, he had been busy with various matters of the Church, and this was the first time he had set foot here as a ruler. I order you to go to the kingdom of Grey Castle with other pure witches. Take advantage of the chaos caused by the heavy snow to destroy the rebels Timothy Wimbledon and Roland Wimbledon. Do you understand? The door of the elevator cage was closed, and the sound of the capstan turning came from overhead. The cage began to slowly descend, but he did not hear any response from Zero. Damn it, it seems that the whipping hasn't taught her to be obedient. Maine turned around with a sullen face, only to see Zero raise the corner of her mouth with a dangerous glint in her eyes. Then a dim light directly pounced on him. Chapter 386. When the darkness dissipated, Maine found himself standing in an empty square. Everything in front of him had a familiar impression: low houses, a monastery that was still under construction, and a brand new stone church. The mud was dry and solid, without any trace of snow. The sun above his head was faintly discernible through the clouds, and the gentle breeze that brushed his cheeks from time to time was warm and gentle. It did not feel like he was in the months of demons at all. Wait, he suddenly realized, is this the old holy city when I first became a believer? At that time in the square, it was His Holiness O'Brien who presided over the baptism ceremony. So this is the place that left the deepest impression on you. Zero's voice suddenly came from behind him. It's really a good place. Pure witch. His temporarily disconnected memories were all connected in an instant, and he felt a sudden burst of anger. He turned around, stared at her, and said word by word, Zero, are you crazy? How dare she use her ability on me? And why didn't the god's stone of retaliation I carried work? I know what I'm doing very well. Zero smiled. But you? I'm afraid you're still in the dark. It doesn't matter, this is the world of consciousness, and there's plenty of time. I can explain it to you slowly. Maine was no stranger to the ability of the soul battlefield. In the world of the eroded, one could only fight with their consciousness. The winner would get everything, and the loser would lose everything. This was also an extremely rare summoning ability. If one did not wear a god's stone of retaliation, it was almost impossible to avoid. But, damn it, I'm wearing a god's stone of retaliation. He reached into his inner pocket and took out the sky blue crystal. Under the sunlight, its polygonal outline glowed with a bright blue luster, and there was nothing unusual about it. Why? Maine gnashed his teeth. Do you mean the god's stone? Zero smiled. It's very simple. Its domain tremor has been smoothed out. Of course, for mortals, they can't feel the difference. The tremor has been smoothed out. The Pope could not help but widen his eyes. There was only one person in the Holy City who could remove the anti-magic effect of the god's stone of retaliation, the pure witch Isabella. This is a blatant betrayal. This group of damned bitches. Maine could feel the blue veins on his forehead bulging. His hands were trembling with rage. He had known that these tools were unreliable. He should have turned them all into the god's punishment army when he was crowned. Trying his best to restrain his anger, he said hatefully, when did this happen? How would I know how she did it? Didn't you put me in prison to teach me a lesson? Zero shrugged. I just asked her to do it, that's all. What a good word of entrustment. If you hadn't planned this for a long time, she wouldn't have done such a blasphemous act so easily. No, he suddenly realized that even the two of them would not be able to do this. After taking over the position of the Pope, he moved into the bedroom that originally belonged to His Holiness O'Brien in the church. Not only was it full of all kinds of traps, but it was also guarded by many judgment warriors. Not to mention that there were several superior god stones at the head of the bed. He took them every day and was accompanied by guards wherever he went. How could she have had a chance to do it? Being so angry, Maine calmed down. What do you want to do? Just to retaliate against my punishment? Even if you kill me, the whole cave under the basket is under the influence of the god stone. Where can you escape to? Once you land, the judgment warriors who have been waiting for a long time will notice and then arrest you. Don't think that you can hide from the pivotal secret agency. When they start the interrogation by torture, you'll find that the whipping you received a few days ago is nothing more than an itch. I'm not going to escape. Zero shook her head. I want to replace you and take over the position of the Pope. Maine was stunned. He had imagined all kinds of situations, but he did not expect to hear such an answer. A pure witch becoming the Pope. You're daydreaming. I was the one who was crowned in front of many believers in the cathedral. Do you think that if you kill me, they will recognize your power? I don't need to show up in front of many people. I only need to act as the Pope's messenger, Zero said casually. You see, His Holiness O'Brien also stays in the pivotal secret temple all year round and occasionally wears a mask when he goes out. In this case, who will find out that the Pope has changed? You can't hide it until then. Didn't you hear what I just said? As soon as the basket falls to the ground and they see that I'm not there, you will immediately be captured by them. Maine growled. It's not too late to let me out now. I can pretend that you have never done such a reckless thing. Once the battle of souls starts, it can't end. Zero laughed. Moreover, they won't arrest me. You were wrong from the beginning. Won't arrest me, what does that mean? The Pope frowned and stared at the pure witch, trying to see something from her eyes. However, there was no trace of timidity or panic in her eyes except for the sparkling light. She did not look away either. Instead, she quietly looked at him, as if she was saying something very normal. Maine suddenly felt a flash of lightning in his mind. Even giving up is a wise choice. Child, I'm sorry. Child, I'm sorry. He opened his mouth, but felt that his throat was choked by a pair of big hands. He could hardly make a sound. His heart kept sinking, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. After a long time, he said with difficulty, "Is this all because of O'Brien? It seems that you finally understand." Zero raised her eyebrows. His Holiness the Supreme Pontiff has ordered all the guards and judgment warriors in the pivotal secret temple. They will never leave the underground and will only listen to the Supreme Pontiff. You took over the scepter in the church on the ground, but you are still not the ruler of the pivotal secret temple. She chuckled. Think about it, we are right above the top of the cave, and the core organization of the church is under our feet. This is also the only place where we can avoid all the guards on the ground and not be affected by the God's stone of retaliation. Don't you think it's an excellent stage? The pure witch stopped smiling, and the light in her eyes bloomed like flames. This is also the battlefield that His Holiness has arranged for us. When the battle of souls is over, the one who survives will become the true ruler of the church. That's what's going on. Maine felt his throat go dry. Damn old woman. Just because I stole the power that originally belonged to the witches, you want to atone for your sins in this way? How ridiculous. The glint in the pure witch's eyes was clearly a burning ambition, an emotion that was almost impossible to see in the pure witch. They were educated as tools from birth and should be loyal to the higher-ups of the church. If I hadn't devoured those daring people. No, damn it. Maine suddenly remembered what His Holiness had said to him before he attacked the kingdom of Wolfheart. I will send 2 pure witches to assist you in the battle. No one can escape from them. Has he never thought about what kind of impact seizing the memories of the Wolf King and the Queen of Clearwater would have on Zero? Recalling Brian's final expression of relief, he finally realized the meaning behind the other party's last words. Maine clenched his teeth angrily. How could the old man not have thought about this? He had long prepared to let the ambition return to the pure witch's heart. Is this the result you want to see, Your Holiness the Pope? Chapter 387. Don't be so sad, Lord Maine. Zero put her hands behind her back and slowly walked around the square. The church was originally founded by the Union. His Holiness is just giving the witches a chance to return the things to their rightful owners. If you win, you can also get my memories and experiences. That's the wealth I've accumulated over 200 years. So that's why. It's strange to have Zero activate the image of the Reflection Church. No matter how much the Pope likes her, she's just a pure witch and shouldn't have access to the deepest secrets of the church. Unfortunately, I neglected this point at that time. After a moment of silence, Maine said, If you win, where do you plan to lead the church? To victory. Zero raised her head and said, Or to destruction. Anyway, it can't be the Fjord Islands. W.H. At. Do you really think that no one knows about your secret order? Zero's tone revealed a hint of sarcasm. Before the war, you diverted some resources to the port of the Kingdom of Everwinter to repair the ships and provide for the sailors. In addition, you chose a large number of scapegoats and sent them to the gallows. This is a big deal. It's almost impossible to hide it from the church's spies. Damn it, O'Brien actually handed over the intelligence agency of the pivotal secret area to her. What does that mean? As the Pope, of course, I have to think further. If there's no other way, I can ensure the continued existence of the church. I'm afraid that even you don't believe your own words, right? Zero sneered. You've just received the scepter in front of so many believers, and you've already started to think about your own escape route. The Battle of Divine Will hasn't started yet, but you've already lost the belief to win. A mortal like you wants to get the smile of God? What bullshit is God's smile? Maine could not help but roar. If God really cares for us, how can he let the human race lose again and again? He took 2 deep breaths and lowered his voice. Besides, we still have to rely on the God's punishment army to fight against the demons. Time is the most pressing issue. What can you change? No, not only the God's punishment army, Zero said softly. The fate of the human race shouldn't be entrusted to a small group of people. Do you want me to rely on you witches? Maine sneered twice. Don't forget how your compatriots suffered a crushing defeat 400 years ago. Witches are only a small group of humans. She stopped and looked straight at the Pope. The light in her eyes sent a chill down his spine. This is a decisive battle that will determine the fate of mankind. Naturally, everyone has to participate in it. Regardless of gender, age or gender, everyone will become glorious warriors and rush to the battlefield until the demons are defeated, or all die. Ridiculous, is this your plan to let those civilians who are scared stiff by the sight of demonic beasts fight the demons? Maine suddenly froze. The other party's expression didn't seem like he was joking. Instead, he was seriously narrating his plan. The only way to give civilians the ability to fight was, you want to feed everyone the pill of berserk? He asked in disbelief. If a single berserker can't compare to Scourge, what about 10? Zero tilted her head and said, now is the time when demonic beasts are rampant. Not only will the supply of raw materials be stable, but the pivotal secret area may also be able to develop a few new formulas. 5 years later, the church will be able to save 3 to 4 million pills. What does this mean? She paused. It means that in addition to the God's punishment army, the Holy City can also send several armies of up to 1 million berserkers to participate in the war against the demons. You're crazy. Crazy? You underestimate the Doomsday War. The pure witch suddenly shouted. Whether it's the Union or the Church, all they think of is to use a small force to resist the enemy's all-out attack. Failure is only reasonable. In the face of this war, no one can stay out of it. Mortals can't always hide behind the gods' punishment army or the witches. As I said before, this is a battle of fate. Everyone should do their best. Only then will they be qualified to compete with the demons in the barbarian land. The pure witch raised by the Church would never say such words. This was the will of the conqueror. Maine's face was as white as a sheet. You're a real bastard. Your Holiness, oh, Brian, did you really foresee all this? Accepting knowledge is a process of self-change. Only the integration of ideas will bring about progress. Zero took a deep breath. Perhaps, we should end this conversation and decide who is in charge of the Church. Don't think that you've won. The Pope gritted his teeth. This is the world I built. As his voice fell, a burst of red mist suddenly appeared under his feet and spread in all directions. Zero was slightly startled. She then clutched her throat and let out a scream. The skin on her face was like a curled orange peel, wrinkling and falling off piece by piece. Blood seeped out and flowed freely. Soon, she was no longer human. This is the devil's fog that is stored in the pivotal secret mechanism. It is only harmful to witches who possess magic power, Maine said in a hateful voice while standing in the middle of the red fog. If I were to fill the entire square with it, even if you have 1,000 methods, you would only be able to struggle in pain inside the fog, dying over and over again. Is that so? A gust of wind suddenly blew and swept away the red mist around the pure witch. The newly resurrected Zero endured the pain and said, as expected of the new pope, you really have some new tricks up your sleeve. If you had gone to the library of the pivotal secret temple from the beginning, I'm afraid that this battle would have been more difficult. Of course, this is also the fun of the battle of souls. This is the wind stone. Maine noticed that there was a ring inlaid with a green crystal on her finger. The range of the magic stone was limited. As long as he kept a distance, he could use the god's stone of retaliation to destroy this barrier. However, just in case, he still had to make some preparations. His mind turned quickly, and he constructed 2 pills of madness and swallowed them in one breath. Oh, a wise choice. Zero grinned. Your biggest weakness is that you're not good at fighting. The dual-color pill can enhance your physical strength, agility, and pain tolerance. Even if I attack you with a long-range weapon like a crossbow, it won't be so convenient. Maine did not pay attention to her. He moved to a position where the magic stone could not affect and concentrated on creating the god's stone of retaliation. At this time, the madness drug had already taken effect. He felt his strength was rapidly increasing and his vision became extremely clear. With the god's stone in hand, he had the most effective weapon to restrain the witches. If she dared to rush over, she would immediately die from the erosion of the red mist. She was also constructing her own weapon. What was it? A 2-handed long sword. It was understandable if it was a crossbow, but why would she need a sword? Moreover, the shape of the long sword was also very strange. The sword was as wide as a person's body and was inlaid with several crystals. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. Then Zero raised the weapon in her hand. Do you know? In the illusion room of the Reflection Church, there is more than one copy of the recording. What do you mean? Have you forgotten what His Holiness O'Brien said? The battle between Alice and Natalia was also recorded by the Union. She said word by word, in addition to devouring, observing and learning are also my strengths. After saying this, the crystals on the sword lit up one by one, as if foreshadowing something. Then a dazzling golden light emerged from the blade and instantly tore the red mist apart, shooting straight into the sky. As if responding to this power, the sky also fell with a dazzling light. What is this ability? Maine's eyes widened. What answered him was a golden light that engulfed everything. In an instant, the whole world fell apart in this golden light. The cage slowly fell on the ground of the god's stone cave. Zero threw the clothes on her shoulder to the ground and walked out of the cage. The whip marks on her back had all disappeared, as if they had never existed. The judgment warriors standing by her side bowed their heads respectfully and handed her the golden robe that they had prepared earlier. It was the clothing that symbolized the highest power of the church. With the help of the crowd, Zero put on a loose robe and walked towards the pivotal secret temple without looking back. Chapter 388. After a week of hard work, Roland built a new chemical factory next to the Redwater River. Taking into account the toxicity of nitrogen oxides, the factory looked like a convenience market at first glance. The walls and wooden ceiling were not enclosed, leaving a one-story gap in the middle. The ventilation was excellent, and of course, the temperature was no different from outside. The new oxygen and nitrogen synthesis equipment was already in operation. The instantaneous high temperature produced by the black fire was no different from an electric arc, and its efficiency was even higher than that of an electric arc. After the 2-meter-tall reactor was filled with raw materials according to the ratio, it only took Anna a quarter of an hour to convert it into nitrogen dioxide, which was then converted into nitric acid in water. The nitrogen and hydrogen synthesis equipment was also in full swing. Since the liquid nitrogen produced by cooling was far greater than the liquid oxygen, the excess nitrogen could be used to produce ammonia. Naturally, Roland would not abandon the conventional industrial production of nitric acid. He followed the two-legged plan. Every additional nitric acid production line would provide him with more chemicals. Based on the tests of Paper's ability, he found that she could indeed accelerate the reaction of nitrogen and hydrogen under heat, and the speed was so fast that it seemed to skip the process and directly show the results. The drawback was that she still could not control the release of magic power well. In addition, she was still underage, so her already low magic power was quickly depleted. However, this drawback could be improved through continuous practice. According to Vendi, the little girl was improving very quickly. In about a week, she would be able to maintain the effect of her ability at a fixed level. With these two production lines and a stable nitroglycerin output, smokeless gunpowder, which was close to the modern level, would also be produced. The next step was to design a new continuous firing firearm and put it into production as soon as possible. As Roland was thinking about the weapon selection, his personal guard walked into the office and reported, "Mr. Philin Schilt and his father, Sir Schilt, would like to see you. They are waiting in the reception room." Philin. He thought for a moment. Wasn't that the former First Knight of the Western Region, the Light of Dawn? His clansmen should be staying in Longsong's stronghold. Why did they suddenly come to Border Town? Did they say why they were here? Mr. Philin said that it's related to witches and asked me to give this to you. The guard handed over an exquisite piece of parchment. The pattern on it was exactly the treasure map drawn by the Light of Dawn before. But compared to the rough sketch, the lines on the parchment seemed to be printed. Roland suddenly remembered that Philin had once said that this map came from the inheritance of the family 400 years ago, and lightning had found the stone tower where Agatha was hiding through the marks on the map. His interest was immediately piqued. Go and call Miss Agatha back. She should still be in the chemistry lab. I'll see them right away. Yes, Your Highness. After the guard left, Roland rolled up the map and went to the living room. Philin and an old man immediately stood up and bowed to him. The prince noticed that both of them were wearing thick leather coats and that their shoulders were wet. The old man's forehead was already covered with sweat. He couldn't help but laugh. If you feel hot, you can take off your coat. There's heating in the castle, so the temperature is much higher than outside. Be careful not to suffocate. Heating? Philin was startled. It's a new type of heating equipment. It's much better than a fireplace. Roland didn't explain too much. Instead, he changed the topic to the purpose of the other party's visit. I heard that you came for the witches. Yes, Your Highness, the Light of Dawn quickly nodded. I met a blue-haired woman in the convenience market. He briefly recounted his experience these days. After returning to the family territory, my father told me about the origins of my family. So, I think she might be a witch. So that's how it is. After listening to the other party's story, Roland was greatly surprised. He didn't expect that an ordinary person from the Agatha family would actually survive and continue to this day. There is indeed such a witch in Border Town, and her name is indeed Agatha. Sir Schilt stood up excitedly. Then can your highness please, let you meet? Roland nodded with a smile. Of course, she should be on her way back to the castle. In addition, considering that she is a witch, I think it's better for you to take off the god's stone of retaliation from your body. For her, this is also a basic etiquette. Ah, you're right. Sir hurriedly took out the god's stone from his pocket and put it on the side of the long table. More than 400 years ago, the tequila simply didn't have this kind of etiquette, and they weren't hunted like animals by the church. Nightingale whispered in his ear. For Agatha, this thing is just a research material. This way, it's easier for you to judge whether what they say is true or not. Roland covered his mouth and chuckled. Then he felt Nightingale gently pinch his neck. Liar. Why did you call me back? Agatha pushed open the door of the living room and said with a face full of hesitation. The battle of divine will is about to begin, I should seize every moment to produce weapons to fight against. Probably because she saw that there were outsiders present, she swallowed the word devil. If there's nothing important, you can ask someone to tell me. Probably because she worked together with the chief alchemist, the way she spoke also had a trace of Kyle Sichi's style. Moreover, this spirit of dedicating every minute and every second to the production of Border Town made Roland, the owner of the town, feel a little guilty. He cleared his throat. Ahem, this matter is still quite important. Do you remember that 400 years ago, when the tequila was about to be destroyed, there was a team of servants who separated from you and followed the main army to the south of the impassable mountain range? I seem to have some impression of it. Agatha took off her snow-covered hood and fluttered her beautiful blue hair. But how important is this? It's been so long. When she revealed her true face, Philin and Sir simultaneously gasped. The latter directly knelt down on one knee. You really are Lady Agatha. You are. Agatha frowned. I'm the descendant of Kager. Do you still remember this name? Sir raised his head and asked expectantly. Kager, of course, this name was given by me. She shrugged. I once bought 2 mortal servants. One was named Kraft, and he served as the family's guard captain. The other was Kager, and he took over the position of the butler. At this point, she paused for a moment. So, you're the descendant of the butler who sneaked away with the magic stones and the experiment records? What, sneak away? Sir's eyes widened. No, go. Agatha's face darkened. I don't want to see you again. Chapter 389. After the witch finished speaking, she left the hall directly, not even giving the two a chance to explain. Roland slightly tilted his head. What's the matter, can you see anything? Both sides are telling the truth, Nightingale whispered in his ear. So that's how it is, he thought for a moment and quickly guessed the general cause of the matter. The truth doesn't represent the truth, but the truth that I believe to be true. It seems that the problem lies in the book that recorded the family history. Since you specially came here from Longsong Stronghold, don't be in a hurry to go back. Stay at Philin's house for a few days, you can also take a look at the town's scenery. Roland looked at the confused Sir. I'll ask her about the situation, maybe you can have a chat with her. Is that so? Sir was startled, then lowered his head and said, then I'll have to trouble your highness. By the way, where are the magic stones and ancient books you brought? They're all in the cabin, there are 10 boxes. Very good, transport them all to the castle, Roland nodded, seeing that her things from more than 400 years ago can still be preserved. I think her mood will ease. After dinner, the prince called Agatha to his office. Maybe you should listen to Sir Schilt, he repeated the story told by the other side. No matter what your steward did, he at least came to you with the idea of returning the things to their original owners. Maybe he also wanted to make up for the responsibility owed by his ancestors. He deceived his own descendants. These people don't owe me anything. Agatha curled her lips, and now the witch family is meaningless. They are also one of the nobles of the western region, right? If I accept them, it will make it inconvenient for you to do what you want to do next. You want to take the entire jurisdiction of the western region into your own hands, right? Roland was slightly startled. He didn't expect the other to actually think of this, then smiled and shook his head. Well, what you said makes sense. But you don't seem to blame them. I don't need to accumulate my anger towards the mortals of 400 years ago on his descendants, not to mention that they don't even know about it. No wonder she is an open-minded witch of the Witch Kingdom, Roland sighed in his heart. Whether it is the attitude towards mortals or the degree of acceptance of new things, she has a positive attitude. In his opinion, there is no doubt that this is an excellent attitude, but for a 400-year-old tequila, it is probably an unusual behavior. It is no wonder that she was excluded by other witches in the Quest Society. In that case, I will explain to them, he said with a smile. Next, I wonder if you are interested in counting your inheritance. Agatha rolled her eyes and said snappily, it's not mine, it's the Quest Society's legacy. All the boxes were moved to the basement of the castle. In addition to Agatha, Roland also called Tilly, Sylvie, and Anna. Under Sylvie's scrutiny, the boxes were opened one by one. Of the 15 wooden boxes, 10 contained magic stones. Roland casually took out a palm-sized crystal and smacked his tongue. You said that they are all transformed from God's stones of retaliation. Such a large piece of God's stone is probably worth 200 or 300 golden dragon, 200 or 300 golden dragon. Agatha said disdainfully, magic stones can only be made by chaos beasts, and each one is considered a priceless treasure. What kind of magic stones are these? Tilly asked. They don't look convenient to carry around. Stones of light. She pressed the stone in the prince's hand and injected magic power into it. A pale yellow light suddenly flowed out and soon surpassed the brightness of the torches. She only let go when the light was a little dazzling. More than half of these are stones of light. Other than those produced by chaos beasts, the rest are the spoils of war we seized from Devil's Town. How are magic stones polished into different sizes? Anna asked curiously. Since they are originally God's stones of retaliation, it means that they can't be cut with magic power. But the whole piece of God's stone is very hard, and it doesn't look like it can be cut with knives or axes. The whole piece of God's stone. Agatha was startled. You mean the God's stone vein? It's at the bottom of the mine in Border Town. Roland told them about the treasure map. Its surface is so hard that even a gun can only leave a shallow mark on it. I see. She could not help but laugh. You found my laboratory tower with this map. Yes, it is indeed used by the Quest Society to mark the God's stone vein and choose the site for the construction of the Holy City. The Holy City. The four of them said in surprise. Otherwise, why do you think there are more than 100 cities on the fertile plains but only 3 holy cities? She curled up the corner of her mouth. The so-called holy cities are all built on the God's stone of retaliation mines. In addition to making it convenient to explore the relationship between magic power and magic stones, it is also to prevent large-scale damage caused by fights between witches, which requires a lot of God's stones of retaliation. So you originally planned to build a new holy city on the North Slope Mountain? Roland asked in surprise. If the Battle of Divine Will hadn't been defeated so quickly, Agatha sighed. In addition, the barbarian ridge at the fracture of the impassable mountain range is also the same. Now you call it the Hermes Plateau, which is where the holy city of the church is located. And they also continue to call it the Holy City, Tilly said with a frown, so that group of people is more likely to be the successor of the Union. Fortunately, they didn't build the holy city of the church in the western region, Roland quietly sighed. In short, the god's stone itself is almost indestructible. If you want to divide it and use it, you must use a special solvent, Agatha continued, the magic power of which is blood, or the demon's blood. Blood, solution. Sylvie could not help but widen her eyes. Yes, depending on the quality of the god's stone, the amount of blood needed also varies. She spread out her hands and said, in the holy city, adult witches are obliged to donate their own blood. Since the blood will soon lose its magic power after leaving the body, it must be used immediately. Every 2 or 3 years, under the command of the Union, witches with suitable conditions will go to the mine area to donate blood. Of course, all the demons they catch will also be used for this purpose. Have you also had such an experience? Anna asked. Of course, Agatha nodded, even the 3 chiefs of the Union are no exception. What about demonic beasts? Sylvie said, some demonic hybrids also seem to contain magic power. Indeed, but their magic power is very small, so they can only be used to process broken god's stones, and are useless for the original mine. Agatha replied, after the god's stone is divided, its strength will sharply decrease as its volume decreases, and its area of influence will also be greatly reduced. For example, the god's stone of retaliation that is convenient to carry around can be easily broken with a hammer. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.